Judy, you want a chair? There's a chair.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
It's done.
Yeah.
Husband and wife can sit together.
Yeah, we just didn't know who to expect, so, yeah.
So if you want to slide your chair over to your significant other, that's okay.
Where we don't.
Then you don't have, that was gonna say that, but I just. You want to bring that up. Now put it at percent. Now you're not, we're not streaming though, because I'm on my computer right now. That still says there's no change. I got Kermit. What's that? Yeah, fine.
Yeah, that's it. Check, check, check. Check, check, check.
All right, thanks. I'll call you if I need. All right, boss. Okay. I'll try to answer that. What's that? Oh, it's, I can do it. It's just gonna show up here on the side. Like, over here, they'll see kind of that stuff, but it's just gonna show up over here. So many types of questions. And they'll be able, you know, they'll be able to see it, but we can announce what it is. And answer it. You just, let me know. Yeah, and oh. Yeah. Sure. Chat function. Ask questions.
take the items out of the envelope, just want to make sure you keep them in the same order as best you can, or check with me. Because we refer to before the green page and after the green page when we begin, so you can see the difference in the documents.
But everybody, this is, doesn't matter what we do. Is this the calm before the storm, or? Almost anything with it?
I just checked the doorway. There is no one else currently in line waiting to get a packet. They may come in after we start, but I want to be timely and appreciate the short notice for being here during this time to gather some more information from us. So I'm going to first go to the packet. I think it's important when we distribute materials to go over those. So as you're opening them, pulling out the papers,
You're gonna have to speak up a little bit.
thank you, thank you. I may need to use the mic, so please don't hesitate if I'm not loud enough. Thank you. And certainly, I just want to thank, there's some people that helped put this different presentation together. We haven't done a setup like this before. We're always trying something new with technology. We've made some additional purchases because we know that this year is going to be quite variable. And so we're trying to implement these practices this evening. Mr. Cuthbertson is, instrumental to all that I do. He's been a regular presence throughout the summer, and he and I have been attending a variety of weekly meetings and regional meetings throughout July and into this week. The information he gains at his meetings is sometimes different than the information that I gain from my meetings with department heads or other superintendents. However, it allows us to merge the information we receive and develop what we believe are best practices for our building. There's a lot of information in the packet. That's a collective work from many departments and agencies. And of course, we appreciate you being here most of all. So inside the packet, everything in behind the green paper, that's like your placeholder, is information we always give to you at the beginning of the year. Periodically, we issue the green sheet. This is one of those times. We, evaluate how well do we know our community, but everything behind the green sheet is information about technology, information about free and reduced lunch. We're giving that to parents now because they may be making some choices about remote learning, but still have opportunities to receive some of these programs or services. So in ahead of the green sheet are the pieces of information we hope to collect tonight or very quickly. So the first of these that would help us most tonight or within this week is the transportation sheet. This is blue. So this asks parent input on how they can communicate to us about making transportation changes. We are one of the few districts in the region, I think in several surrounding regions, that allows a fluid bus note process for students to get on one bus in the morning. Parent sends in a note, get on a different bus in the afternoon. Sometimes a note is forgotten and we take parent phone calls. With COVID and the very strict transportation guidelines, that flexibility is one of the things that we really are looking at. How can we continue to accommodate our families? As long as we can do that, I think it's important that we do. Or is there some level of commitment that parents can make to allow us some assuredness about a schedule? Because we simply cannot overload a bus by adding another student that would not be on that transportation route. And this information is also feeding into the possibility of pre-K transportation if pre-K funding is released. So this blue sheet is probably one of the first things I need if you're taking transportation. I do want to say, everybody got these materials in their packet. It was just easier to make all the packets the same, so you weren't looking at your neighbor and saying, why don't I have a blue sheet? Well, I live 2 doors down from the school, so it's not in my packet, but I think it would have been confusing if you didn't have the same materials. So then, the yellow sheet is also busing related. This would be helpful, but maybe not as critical as the blue sheet. But very soon after, we probably need this yellow sheet back. We've really tried to pre-label things to save your time so that you don't have to fill out a bunch of unnecessary forms. It's also going to allow us to make sure we are hearing from as many community members as we can. This is a sheet where you know already you don't want to use or won't be using transportation. So you might be concerned about transportation on the bus in COVID, but are entitled to transportation. So you're making your own family plans to transport your child for the year. Or you may have a junior or senior in high school and you're making the plan to allow for them to drive. This form would also free up a seat on our school bus. And these are some of the things that need to help us continue to evaluate our routing plans. We have tried to do that without requiring a firm commitment from our parents for a period of time, but we simply feel like it could flex and change enough that it might even create better balance on all school buses. So those are transportation items, blue and yellow. And then there's a cover letter regarding the virtual learning option and a consent form. So this I do not expect many parents will give us this evening because I'm hopeful that the information we provide, the dialogues you go back and have at home with family members, and or certainly if we have a need to adjust our plan because the COVID cases increase in our region before school opens, or if we learn something different because students are not riding the bus or don't plan to re-enroll or they register at another district, this will allow us to gather that information, but it shouldn't be, I wouldn't expect it to be completed tonight because I think you'll learn more. So again, those are the key items in the packet, and we really probably won't refer to them now. So the rest is a slideshow that we'll have, which we will post for availability on the website. And if anyone would like to print a copy, we'd be happy to provide that by mail. Some of our copiers with the humidity are pulling paper, and so their case is low. So our agenda includes items in the packet, one day reopening possible PCF, a typical K-5 school day, and some question opportunity for you. And I've asked Mr. Cuthbertson to step in because he has been such part of different aspects, and we've kind of split some tasks.
So can everybody hear me? Do you want me to use the mic? Is everybody good? Okay. There is just a question on the screen as I'm doing this. It just asked about will the package be mailed home? So yes, we will mail those home for the people that did not attend tonight so that they will have that information. So very quickly, I'm going to go through these slides, and I do want this to be, I think we do want this to be some open discussion because again, we want to know what's best for the kids. We think we have a plan here that is safe, and certainly that is, and I will preface this with everything that we talk about, that is my number one concern is the safety of your kids. I have kids at home myself. I know there's anxiety. There's anxiety on both ends, whether you send them every day or 2 days a week or you don't send them at all. We know that, but at the end of the day, we think that we can do this safely for your kids and give them the best learning opportunities when they're here in school. So I'm going to kind of go through these as we go. So, and I think these were just things that you talked about, right? What you just talked about, so I'll skip through that. But there is some school data here that we kind of looked at when determining why we want to do what we're doing with our plan. And as you can see, and I know it's hard, but I'll kind of go through this, is contributing data then in the year 2000, PCS had a much higher population of over 750 students. Obviously, we've had decreased enrollment since that time. And actually in 2003, there was a capital project that improved the square footage of the space that we have here by almost 11,000 square feet. So even though the student population was at a 750, we still had some square footage that was put onto the building. At the same time, when you look at now, obviously we are still in the middle of a capital project, almost done. We now have a current total population here at PCS of 480 students. And at the same time, with our capital project and some of the things that we've done, we've almost improved our square footage again by almost 10,000 square foot. So again, when we look at these plans and look at what we can do, and looking at our numbers, it made sense for us that if we could spread people out in rooms, we had the necessary staff. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit about that as far as different staff members, especially at the elementary level. We think that we can accommodate having all the kids back in the building with smaller class sizes and still provide them a safe environment for learning. You want to add anything to that, Mr. Dunn? So here's currently what is the proposed plan. And again, depending on how, things shake out, and again, I will say this, every day, it seems like we get new information and there's new things that are put out by the State Department, by the governor, by SED, Health Department, and we look at those things and we see how that fits with our plan. But currently right now, what we would be looking at, as you know, we made a commitment a couple of years ago, Mrs. Duffin and the Board of Education made a commitment for our primary levels to really go to smaller class sizes so that we can provide the interventions for our kids that they need to get them on grade level to provide them the best opportunity for learning. And we had that through K3. So typically throughout our grade levels, we had 2 sections of every grade level where you were having 18 to 20 kids in a classroom, sometimes even more. When we made this commitment, we went to 3 sections, K through 2. We were able to get smaller class sizes, still provide those interventions, and allow our teachers to work more individually with your kids. In this proposed plan, obviously looking at our numbers, we still are looking at that, and now we would like to be able to do that, obviously with our restrictions of social distancing and things like that. We want to be able to do that K through 5, and actually we've done that K through 12. We've actually cut the class sizes. I don't want to say cut them, but we've made three sections when there was 2. We've made 4 sections when there was 3. And we were able to do that because we had some flexibility with staff and we had some flexibility in our teacher schedules. And again, with any decision that we make, there's always what's going to happen. What's the other side of this? And there are some of those things. We're not going to lie, especially when you get to the high school level. Some of those elective courses maybe we're able to provide for 2 to 5 kids. Maybe we don't run those this year. But speaking primarily at the elementary level, for grades K, 2nd and 3rd, those will be split into 4 sections. They were 2 or 3, and we will now split those into 4 sections based on those numbers. For grade 4, it's a smaller cohort of kids. Right now, currently, it's about 21 kids in that cohort, so that will stay with just 2 teachers. So we didn't need to split that one. And then grades 1 and 5, obviously 1 will stay with the 3 sections they've had previously, but we will plan on making a 3rd, 5th grade section. So this will give you an idea of what the current numbers that we have and what your students will be looking at for class sizes. So for here, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, right now, you're going to have class sizes of 10 or 11 kids in the classroom.
And we're regularly evaluating that because we have had some parents say, I'm going to pick a different pathway. I have a circumstance in my whole household. That means my child may not be able to be safe at school and my household be safe. If there's an illness that comes home, we're taking enrollments and making registration appointments at this time. And so this is regularly being looked at In fact, the fourth section of kindergarten is probably our most recent, and perhaps only as recently as 9 days that we can make that commitment to keep those class sizes, based on some of the telephone calls we took projecting parents registering.
So that's kind of where we are at. And again, this is assuming that every student is coming back to the building. This is not taking into account, virtual learners or anything like that. This is assuming that every kid would come back, every student would come back. So this is what you'd be looking at for classroom sizes. The state with their guidance was very detailed, but at the same time vague enough that it left some interpretation for things. But one of the things that they kind of put in the guidance was looking at square footages of rooms. And basically the overall premise is you got to figure about 20 square foot per person in the room, which clearly when you look at our rooms, we would fit that with these numbers as well as if we had more students involved. And that was the other piece to this is we didn't want to leave ourselves no room for error. If we get new enrollments in, let's say, our kindergarten or first grade, whatever the case may be, we wanted to have that flexibility so that we weren't tying our hands, so to speak, when we got new enrollments. So, rooms, we can accommodate more than what we are putting in those rooms, but we wanted to have that buffer in case we had new enrollments, because you need to do that. So these are some of the questions that we've been getting along the way, and we will try to answer them, and you may have more. Here's an example. How will the district offer remote learning, and which student populations will remote learning be available to? Will remote learning be different than what was offered in the spring? Yes, the clear answer to that is yes. If you have reservations and you don't think that it's safe, or you don't feel like it's a safe thing for your child to come to school, we do have to offer that remote learning, and that's what we will do. And again, a lot of this, and I could sit here and tell you different scenarios, but a lot of it will depend on how that number is. For example, if we get 30% of our population in a particular grade level to say to us, they want remote learning, that may be different for those sections. So for example, instead of having, a teacher, 4 sections of a particular grade level that is on campus, it may look like only 3 sections with a teacher taking the virtual learning. What I do want to be very clear on with the virtual learning is it will not look like it was in the spring. Obviously everybody got put into a difficult situation in the spring. It was not obviously planned. It wasn't something that I don't think anybody planned for. I do feel our teachers did the best that they could do, but at the same time, we also understand that the parents played a big role in that. And the parents had a hard time in doing those things that, typically would be done in school. And, that's going to be very different this year. For remote learning, your child, if you're doing virtual learning, will be on a schedule like they were here in school. For example, when I bring up the school schedule in a couple other slides, if their ELA time is at 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, the expectation is that your child is in that meeting time from 8 to 10 o'clock doing ELA. I mean, it's the only way that we can do this and make it work. It's not going to be, get up when you feel like it, and then there's something there for the child to do. We want there to be interactions with the teacher. In fact, that's one of the accountability pieces that we have to account for. There's attendance to all this. There's an accountability. So we have to maintain that schedule for your children. And I want to be very clear with that, because it's going to entail them eating lunch when their classes are supposed to eat lunch, participating in PE when they're supposed to participate in PE, in library, in ELA, and math. I mean, it is going to be the schedule that they would have here in school, but instead you would have that option as doing it virtually. And again, I'm just going to be honest with you, that's going to be a challenge, especially when you're thinking about PE as an example. We've got to be able to provide that. It's going to look different this year, obviously, with the regulations and the guidance that we have. It's not going to be your typical PE class, but at the same time, we have a duty to offer that because, again, that is part of our curriculum. That is part of what we are here to do. and they need to be a part of it. So yes, it's gonna look very different compared to the spring, but there is that option. And, you know, the governor has been very clear with us that we need to listen to the parents, and that's why we're here. We want that feedback, but at the same time, you know, this is how it's gonna kind of roll up here at home. So the next question, how will districts address remote learning opportunities for students with disabilities, English language learners, homeless students, etc.? We have to provide those. There's no wiggle room for that. If your child has special education services, we need to provide that. There is no flexibility with that. So even whether they're in school or they're there, the district's responsibility is to make sure that we abide by the IEP. That's very clear.
And I just would add one thing, and that is, you know, all schools do have more challenges in remote delivery for some of those populations. Not consistently all, or it might vary by school. So the BOCES within regions are also addressing resources, asking us to reach out or contact them if there are challenges so that we can consult with them.
Okay. Scenarios that will require students and staff to be tested for COVID. You want to take this one?
Sure.
This is more.
Any symptom, to be honest, any symptom that you checked on your way inside the building. And that has changed some throughout the summer, what would be symptomatic or not. And I understand there's a meeting this week still for health agencies that may add some clarification. But our intention is the screening at campus. We tried some other, discussing about some other models, including, can we send a note home to parents that says, please sign indicating that, sorry, I see, you can't see me. Please sign indicating that if you bring your child to the school bus, you are assuring us that they are healthy for school, at least at the time they leave your house. And so we asked, could we send a note home like that? And then if the parent, if the child is sick, the assumption is before they get to the car or the bus stop or start walking to school, that they would not come to school. The legal advice we received was that a passive assurance, one time a year or one time a month, would not be recommended. So we are trying to figure out, is there a way for parents to fill out a form on our website every day to do the same thing? Sometimes the online forms create issues with privacy. We need to make sure it's the parent filling out the information, not the student. So we're still working through that. So at this time, we are planning for students to come to the building and be screened. And so we are hopeful to use our device this evening, but we don't have all the configuration done, and we want to be very safe with this. So this is a temperature scanning device. It has several features to it, and we need to set the program so that it is not using any kind of facial recognition. That's very important with technology privacy. And so that needs to be dismantled as we implement it, and will be. But you would simply walk up to the machine, and this would happen at designated entrances that are separated at the building. Place your forehead by it, it reads the temperature, stores the temperature, can send it directly, a summary to, you know, we would identify Mrs. Odesag so that she knows the circumstances. Once we do some tests inside the building, we'll better understand how quickly that information can transfer to her office. But as soon as a student has an elevated fever or temperature, they would be brought to the isolation room inside the building. We're trying to designate 3 different areas because we really made an effort to separate our students into 3 zones for most, if not nearly all of the day when they're in class. So they would go to their isolation room, and Same thing for staff. Staff are filling out the same form that you filled out coming into the building. They're required to fill it out before they come to work, come to school. We're trying to work through some issues. We do have some employees who do not have a cell phone or any technology, are computer users. So we may need to have a remote kiosk perhaps in our bus garage or something where they interact with a few people. But employees also have to sign out so that we know they were in or out of the building. We need those things because we allow staff to come in after hours and on the weekends with key fobs. They enjoy that privilege to get work done in their rooms, but it also becomes our contact tracing hub. So those would be any of the symptoms, a single one, and the student would need to go to the isolation room and a parent would be called. There's more information about the full process on a future slide, so I don't want to.
Yeah, so I'm gonna, these questions are here, but these questions are kind of answered in these next couple slides, but I will refer to them as we go through here. So here, this is talking about finding testing sites. You know, there's, again, the guidance that we've been given is we have to work very closely with our Department of Health here at Herkimer County. And when there's those suspected or there's a confirmed case, you know, we have to work with our county department and then they kind of take control really at the end of the day, because it becomes a county health issue where they're going to be doing the back end work of who the tracing. They're going to ask for our information. We have to provide that information as far as who the student was maybe in contact with, you know, different scenarios where they were on the bus with or in the classroom or different things. And then they kind of take control of that and they will be doing the legwork as far as the tracing piece when it goes from there.
So one of the new reopening conditions that came out recently was for the school to specifically talk about this topic with the community and also add it to their website or notification procedure. So when I looked at the website, where might make most sense, where could it be easiest to find, et cetera, I think these sites for testing that the school district has to share with the community will not only be in the quick link section under the COVID information, but also in the student parent drop-down tab. And as those change, we will update it. And actually the next slide shows information received today about where you can go for testing. This is as of 2 o'clock. So there's different types of testing. There's been some questions about if your child or our employee has a symptom and is not able to come to work, what allows, where do they get the test and what type of test do they need, because there's multiple test types. As of Tuesday, I was told that if testing is required, it needs to be the diagnostic test, that these others, the antigen test and antibody test, are not as confident. That may change, again, with the meetings happening in the region. The 3 known sites that were presented to me to share and would be added to our websites are Primary Urgent Care, Bassett Occupational Testing, and Griffith Air Force Base. I'm not sure the cost, but 2 of those sites have costs, and now I'm hearing some of the local pharmacies may be offering things, but you'll see after each site, I identified what type of test they offer. And this, again, would be updated as more sites open, if sites need to relocate because of any kind of barriers.
So just as a question in the chat, so it says, are you going to isolate a kid for each and every symptom? What about during winter when most kids have runny noses and coughs?
Yeah, so this is then becomes the challenge for us. I mean, realistically, we believe that if that practice is still what is expected of schools, it's very likely we're going to be in a continuous cycle of possibly closing if students are quarantined. We may have to, as we get into winter season, add some more isolation rooms, more specifically to a grade level. And those would be things that we still have some spaces where we can grow into. They're not classroom size, but they could be used for small groups of isolation. So that's a great question.
I think the question, what they were really asking is, if the kid has runny nose and a
Yes.
cough during the flu season, are you gonna make them go get tested?
That is well, no, they're going to go to they're going to be brought to the isolation room. The parent is going to be contacted, and the parent is going to be asked to take some steps, and they're on another slide. And I want you to be able to look at them as I'm talking about them. So yes, that is the guidance we have right now. And honestly,
So possibly
probably,
at some point in time, the whole school could be getting tested.
absolutely. And so our concern is not just Poland, but in Herkimer County, the number of students that may need to go to all those sites, because our schools are very close with each other. We have employees whose spouses are at other schools. That is probably one of the items that is really hard to evaluate how that will work. Very
So-
clearly, we see the same issues I think you may be.
And just to be clear, when they're asking those questions, there are specific questions. So like a kid may have a runny nose, which we would then, secure that first. But then the background, there is some other questions that you ask, and then you'd be able to know, they're gonna give some information to us to let us know, were they possibly exposed or not? Or are there other symptoms with that? So it is, but it's also not right away. If a kid has a runny nose, they gotta get tested.
So the other part of it is, and I'll just say, I mean, the form you used much is, as I said, the same as our employee form. And so in implementing it, we modified that form 3 different times to make sure that it was functional, didn't violate HIPAA. We had opportunity for someone to say yes, no to each of the individual questions. And then when we looked at that, we said, when you're saying, do you have a temperature of 100 or higher, that's actually medical information. So we have to cluster them all together as one to maintain privacy. But it also says, and you don't have it, we have it, but it says, if it cannot be otherwise explained. And I was sharing with a board member that I have a family member who takes medication for high blood pressure. In the short time after the medication for high blood pressure is taken, there's a tickling cough my family member has. It's every day if the person takes medication. It's not because they have COVID symptoms necessarily. It's anticipated, it's a short duration of time. So we know there are some things that may be because of the circumstance or medication that you're taking that are in no way COVID. But right now, we are hearing any symptom, they need to go to the isolation room, we call the parent. So it will be a challenge, but we anticipate.
And, honestly, that's also, we have to think about that. I mean, again, the virtual learners that are gonna stay virtual, we know that, but we also have talked about this, that our teachers need to be prepared for that. If we have those symptoms, we have to make sure that we may have a situation where the in and out are happening, and a kid's gotta be quarantined for 14 days, they may show no symptoms. It doesn't make sense for our teachers to have 14 days worth of work sent home, when we can simply have them be part of that at home, still keep instruction going, still have them be part of the class, so that they can keep up with their work. And we've had discussions with our teachers with that's gonna be a possibility. And I anticipate that. I mean, it's inevitable, and I've said this and I'll say it. It's not just Poland opening. When school's open, we're open. It's everybody, it's Whitesboro, it's Utica, it's everywhere. So, we have to be prepared for that as well, and we anticipate that. This is the contact tracing, and again, this is kind of the information that we got from the Department of Health. We do have to supply, but again, we are going to rely heavily on our Department of Health to do this for us. Obviously, there will be a partner in that. We have to make sure that we do what we have to do here, as far as making sure we know where kids are, who they've been in contact with, providing that information if it does come to a situation where they need to have information about a particular student. We have to be very diligent about, providing that information so that the contact tracing can take place.
So in what this might specifically look like would not just be perhaps the Department of Health too, but also our school physician. So we have a school physician, that's a facet. That person would also be an ongoing resource for us. They've been a part of meetings that the superintendents and maybe principals have participated in over the summer. So they review some of our information and sharing, but the contact tracing would likely look like this student may have symptoms. If we've been asked for information about a student, we would likely print out just the demographic information. We have phone number, address in the student portal for school tool. You know, that's really where we're going to get our resources, but we will be only sharing that as we are directed to. So that's why it's important to work with them.
Can I ask a question in regards to that? So if our child has been exposed to somebody who, like immediately exposed to somebody who has tested positive, is the school going to notify us, or are we waiting days to hear from public health?
No, the school has no role in notifying you. And cannot.
There's FERPA laws tied to that, so we would be out of compliance with FERPA if the school was to do that. So that's where the
So
Department.
that's where the Department of Health comes in, because they would probably, I anticipate, because I was here in the region and in the school when H1N1 was occurring. It was, I think, my second year as superintendent. So what we would do is we would call the Department of Health and give them information, whether it be about attendance or symptoms, and, you know, have some discussion. When I say we, I don't mean us. You know, really, I mean Mrs. Ozog, I mean the school nurse or the school physician or, you know, medical personnel. So any notification would come from the Department of Health. And I understand that puts, you know, us in a situation where we, and I've said this to staff as well, you know, if a student goes home from your classroom, you're not going to find out from me whether that student tested positive or not. I can't share that. So don't ask me. Now, you may find out, I mean, people find out information or they're connected through family, but they're not going to hear that from me. You know, there's very few people that would be entitled to that information, and certainly not necessarily their classroom teacher. However, if the Department of Health says a student or a staff member with symptoms was in the presence of students for a certain length of time or demonstrated certain aspects, you know, we'll respond accordingly and implement the plans that we're directed to with their partnership.
There's just a couple of questions.
Sure.
One we just talked about, are parents going to have to pick up a kid every time they're in isolation? I don't think it's necessarily, like I was mentioning, it's not always. I think we would certainly do that to be safe. And then I think that's where the other pieces of this come in, where it would depend on those certain other questions that come up.
And this is probably one of the largest challenges, because you may know as a parent or a staff member may know, but it's more common in students, that they have, your child has an ear infection. And perhaps they have some symptoms because of an ear infection. In those instances, certainly open communication with Mrs. Ozog would be very important. But at the same time, we've also been cautioned that we can't just not explore or discuss the condition with you, because a student could be experiencing an ear aid and also COVID. You know, there are two competing conditions could be going on at the same time. So there will still be the conversation with the family, because we need to have that dialogue. And I think it's going to have to be a very specific conversation, and, you know, with the nurse being a part of that, and any agencies. So the summary of steps, it's actually very clear. The two parts are, So a student has, or a staff member has symptoms, and we are going, because of screening, whether it's the Google form teachers are using, which is the form you used tonight, or it's the temperature check, or perhaps a student was here in the morning and in the afternoon, is it feeling well, goes to the nurse, and a temperature is taken, and it's elevated. So a positive indication that there could be COVID, we're going to contact the parent, we're going to encourage the staff member to immediately leave, we're going to get coverage for that classroom, and we're going to ask, we can't get some clear guidance of staff entirely, but we hope to, but for students, we want parents to consult with their doctor, the pediatrician, either have the pediatrician assure us in writing that the child does not have COVID, or we are having the requirement is that the student go for a diagnostic test. Some parents may not have a pediatrician in the area or a way to get to a physician, or they may not want their child to have a diagnostic test. If that is the case, Poland, and I believe other area schools will say, without those things, as a precaution to keep the students safe that are in school, we are placing your child on a 14-day quarantine. We will make the virtual learning available, but you showed symptoms. There's basically 2 ways to re-enter school, and if it, for a variety of circumstances, it even could be weather-related or a vehicle situation, parent can't go to get these assurances for us, the student will need to be out of school. It just simply, because we have the balance of being able to deliver instruction in another way, we feel we need to do that.
So you sent kids out for 14 days to quarantine them.
Yes.
They can't go to daycare because they have to be quarantined for the kids at daycare. How are you going to do virtual learning if you're saying it's such a stringent?
So I'm not saying it's quarantine because they have COVID. I'm just saying that's our.
No, I understand that. But you don't want them going to daycare. I mean, because you're in with possibly all these other kids. So if they're going to stay home, how are they going to do this stringent? If you work, 2 parents working today.
Yeah.
How is that going to work? Can you start that after you go home from work?
No.
Well, I find
Not the
that,
virtual.
I find that a problem
Yeah.
because.
No, it's the challenge that we talk about regularly, and I understand that.
I mean, you can't ask someone to stay out of work for 14
No,
days.
I don't know that we can.
Children are responsible for the parents are working.
Yeah, I mean,
The attendance should be counted against them when it's not.
But, right, so hopefully the pediatrician or the Department of Health.
well, a pediatrician's not going to sign off that your kid doesn't have COVID. I mean, that puts all the responsibility on them. They're not going to do that.
Unless you get tested.
Exactly.
Right.
What if it's a 5 to 7 day test result return?
Correct.
Right, and I think that is why we're hearing.
So you quarantine that's when you get that test result. Does that apply to the rest of the class, or is it? just
Not
apply to
necessarily,
particular?
not necessarily, because we've had, and I appreciate you bringing that up because we didn't put that on the slide, but we also said it may not apply to the rest of the family. Really, right now, I'm at a place where if only one of your children is exhibiting symptoms, doesn't mean I'm going to send your whole family out of the school building for 14 days. And, we haven't yet necessarily had a great deal of discussion with employees about that yet, because this information just came out yesterday for discussion, even for me. But I can't deprive your other child with no symptoms of having an opportunity to learn. So somebody else asked, or maybe it was in the queue, about, does this mean I might have to come to school regularly? It's possible, but I think once those things start to happen, it's probably going to be because the numbers in our county are also perhaps going up, and we will get to a place, very likely, I believe it's just a matter of when, not if, when there are periods of the year when all of us are virtual. And, I will talk about that a little bit because.
So if I can go back to your question, because it is valid, right? And I don't think there's a good answer for it, but I would hope, I would encourage, and I would certainly have conversations with teachers that if there is a situation where we have said the student can't be in school for 14 days, and now they are at a situation where they can't log in on those stringent, just like before, if your kid was sick, I would hope that we would try to provide some of that education some other way. You know, I don't want to call them COVID days, but that's really what they would be. You know, the stringent one would be really for those kids that can do it. We know there's going to be limitations with it. It's going to happen. You know, there's going to be, even if the kid is sick, I mean, they're not going to be able to log on if they're sick. I wouldn't want them to.
Right.
So we know there's going to be those things, but at the other end of this is we also can't let the kids go into school if they are experiencing symptoms and we don't know if they have it or not. It's, you know, we're in a situation where we got to be more safe than sorry. So there and again, everybody said it, it's about flexibility, it's about fluidity. You know, this is a living thing. It's not going to be set in stone. I think we're going to, as we go through this, we're going to find that some things work, some things don't. And really, we have to be able to be flexible and we have to change with what's going on. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I can't say it any other way.
And I have another thought, actually, I think we'll add some clarity. So if you cannot log on because you have to go to work, the difference here is we may be able to supply a paper packet,
Sure.
but your child will now not be counted in attendance for that day if they are not showing up for the class. So we might be able to say, here's the key elements of the day. We're not going to send perhaps an elementary PE packet home just for 14 days. But here's your math, here's your ELA. You have a situation where you can't jeopardize your employment. We respect that. And we don't want that for our community either. But we also have an obligation from the state to report attendance in an entirely different way. So if your child doesn't report during math and ELA time, they're going to be marked absent. We have to figure out that coding. We want it to be clear at the end of the year because the state hasn't told us yet what data they're collecting about attendance, how much, whether it's absences total or absences related to COVID or absences of all, not related to COVID too. So we want to correctly label that, but you could still have the learning materials. The difference would be attendance or not attendance. I think that might be helpful to you as well, if you have a situation.
That may be one thing that should be brought up to some of the state, if they have the meetings. Those absences should be labeled as COVID absences, whether the parents have to make adjustments, the state should have to make adjustments also.
Yeah, we probably will overcode that.
I know you laugh, I mean, they make adjustments for everything else.
No, we will probably be overcautious on putting more information than not, because if we start out with saying absent, 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 then they tell us they want it broken down in a certain manner, we're gonna have to do so much backtracking for every day of the school year. You know, we're trying to do it now. So yes, I agree with you. If they decide they only want all the absences, that's an easy number. We just run that report. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Just a couple of questions here. I think it's more of a statement. Since the Department of Health is responsible for notifying those in contact with COVID for every school in the country or county, won't there be a huge delay? Child is exposed on Monday, not find out for days. So I think we know that is a possibility. You know, the hope is that, you know, the testing will become quicker. You know, on that end of it, I know that there's other hospitals, there's other testing sites that are popping up. I know that because my wife is in that world, and they're trying to do this because they know this is going to be real for schools and everybody. So I think that the hope is that they can shorten that time, but again, that's not a guarantee.
And I hadn't thought about this, so I'm going to jot this down for my own, you know, question. Certainly, we're very close to Oneida County. So at this point in time, we're not working with the Oneida Department of Health, County Department of Health in the same way we are with Herkimer, because our building is in Herkimer County. However, it's oftentimes just as easy for me as well as probably many of you to go to Oneida County direction or Herkimer County direction. I have some choices. It's almost the same distance for me. So in what you just said, I was thinking I will add some Oneida County locations. I'm not honestly clear if a family gets tested and, you know, is even in a remote location, you may know this because of what your wife does, how other agencies get involved. So, you know, I need to find some things out there, but I certainly can add to the list of sites.
The well-now urgent cares are doing them,
Yeah.
are doing testing, they're doing both diagnostic and antigen testing.
Thank you.
So I have the contact number for Bassett for anybody who would need to get tested through Bassett. It's 607-547-5555. And that's our COVID hotline. And so anybody that right now, as far as testing goes, if somebody comes in and they have any symptoms, runny nose, sinus headache, I get a sinus headache every day or every year, but I have a sinus headache, they're still getting tested and it's going to the Department of Health. The way that it's broken down right now is that people that are being tested with symptoms, those are going to Wadsworth, to the Department of Health, and our turnaround time right now is less than 72 hours. And people who are getting tested that are asymptomatic, have absolutely no symptoms whatsoever, those are going to Mayo Clinic and ARUP, and it depends on how the rest of the country is, how quickly we're getting those back, but right now we're seeing somewhere between 4 and 8 days for asymptomatic
Thank you.
return time.
That's extremely helpful. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I know the question is the labs, and testing is one thing, it's the turnaround of the labs, and now they're trying to get the labs so that they can turn.
And Bassett has the Abbott ID Nows, and if we get more supplies, then we're going to be able to do testing on site, which is a 45-minute turnaround.
Right.
But it's all being allocated by the state, so.
And then depending on the test, it's the validity of them. There's a lot to it.
So, yeah, so, to give you kind of the shortened version, I would recommend anybody who's interested in hearing about the testing part of this and how we can reopen the country in a realistic way, to listen to the podcast, This Should Be Virology, episode number 640. Basically, they talk about the testing, but the antibody now are coming back negative, basically when people aren't shedding enough virus to be contagious. So that's where, you know.
And if you would send me that information, I'll post it. Thank you. That'd be great.
Just there's a question here about the pre-K program. Is Colin having a pre-K program? So
We are not sure. I wondered if this would come up this evening because I received a courtesy copy that I know West Canada is not holding their program this year because of a variety of situations. And one of those for the region that is a big consideration is funding. So pre-K funding comes from the state budget of finance, and in meetings with the education department, they have not received the pre-K funding for any of the programs in New York State. So superintendents and school boards have been asking, when is this money going to be released? It's typically released in June. And the outgoing commissioner for the education department asked for that information from the governor's office. And as of the last week in July, didn't have an answer. So for Poland, we received $150,000 for pre-K. And when we add in transportation costs and meal costs and some other contracted services, it's about $175,000 program. So I do have a planned board meeting, special board meeting. It's on the website on Monday, just for the board to evaluate what steps. I was going to print out the information from West Canada that I received. I'm not sure that they would be alone because there are many schools in the region that are cutting or worried about cutting positions or adding expenses for COVID. And so if schools have to fund that program out of their general fund. Some of the schools in the region may or may not be able to do that. Mr. Batson's on our board, he's our board president. He has asked for some very detailed financial information to be able to make a decision about that. And I know that we initially did a survey for families to say, if we can't fit or have enough sufficient space on our buses for transporting your child, what will be the impact to you as a family when you bring your child to school? And so we collected that information, and that information was shared with the board too. Yeah. So we don't know as of yet. We've only moved forward with enrolling other grade levels of students, but as soon as we make a determination, we certainly will notify you.
So here's the mask protocol. Obviously, you know, the guidance that we were given by New York State was if you can accomplish social distancing of 6 feet with students and there's instruction, the students would be able to remove their mask. But districts also have the ability to say that they're going to require masks. And I know this is a, you know, hot button topic in some regards. But again, looking at the data and basing what we know about the science of it, the masks help and they do limit the transmission. So we have talked about this at great lengths. You know, it's not the most comfortable thing.
Not at all. We're right. We understand that.
But again, as we look at what is best for every kid in the building and every staff member in the building, to make this work, we feel like the masks are necessary to go. And that's what we plan on doing. We will provide mask break for the students and the teachers. And we know that this is going to be a challenge for your kids. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But I do think kids are resilient, and I do think our teachers are going to put it in a way that they're going to understand why we're doing it. And again, this is the world we live in. And again, we have to think about the safety of everybody, and this is the safest thing that we can do for the students and our staff. And that's where we are with our mask protocol.
And we did, I just want to add one thing, then I'll take a question. Certainly, we did talk about if there are very unusual circumstances where a class size is very small, would we allow something different? And this is where, you know, we took a pause. And in the end, I think we came to the conclusion that we are going to start more restrictive in September when we all come together. And if things are going well, or, you know, students know how to wear them, and it's a high school elective with 2 students and a teacher and a full-size classroom, can we make some decisions a little bit more independently? Possibly. That is not where we're starting, and if we were to change that protocol, we would be notifying families, you know, well in advance. Like next week, we're going to, I mean, that is a huge thing, and we need to make sure that you know those things that we're changing from what's in the plan. So that is where we're starting. You know, similarly with some of the use of hubbies and coat things. You know, we're trying to be very, you know, we'll hang things up, but we're not going to the cubbies throughout the day because that is not safe. So what was your question?
I kind of have 2.
Okay.
Will they be required to wear masks during PE?
Yes. Yep. And again, you know, there's some, and I say yes, because when we start some things, a lot of the things that we're going to be doing with PE are going to be very different. You know, the guidance says that they're doing an activity where they are breathing heavy, 12 feet, okay? You know, I've encouraged teachers when I've had conversations with them, let's go outside and do a lesson. You know, get them outside, separate them, you know, get them some fresh air. You know, we want to do those types of things. But PE is going to be a challenge. And again, what your kids typically are doing in PE is going to be different. There's going to be a lot more, you know, anaerobic type things instead of aerobic type things. There's going to be a lot more flexibility type things.
a lot more knowledge-based things. It's not gonna be a typical PE class where they're gonna go and play a game of soccer. I mean, we can't do those things. You know, and again, this is why we're taught, each of these situations that we're talking about are gonna be unique. But certainly, you know, gyms aren't even open right now because people can't wear a mask when they do that. So there will be certain times that that may come about, but for right now, and the conversations I've had with our PE staff, it's totally changing what they do. But at the same time, we understand that movement for our kids is important. Being able to have an outlet like that is important. It's just gonna look very different. But yes, they will have masks, and then as we navigate through this, and we start to see things or not see things,
Get new guidance.
we get new guidance, you know, that's where it's gonna be.
Also, is there any like punishment, so to speak, if there's a child that refuses to mask on while in school?
That's the question, right? Yeah. You know, we've asked the question, I think it's even gone all the way to the commissioner, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is.
You know, what is that? What is it? Is it a code of conduct violation? Is it an executive order violation? And I think the answer was, we don't know yet, correct? You know,
Certainly, and this is part of, you know, one of the reasons I think we can give our community some good confidence that the two of us have worked here not only together for a period of time, but in this building for a period of time. And we have the luxury of knowing many of our families. And so, I mean, I can't even fathom what this would be like for someone joining a building for their first time and trying to learn family. So we have a little bit of a ability to know, we have students right now who, you know, not necessarily in the elementary wing, but who push the dress code. And so, you know, is it because the student's resisting because it's uncomfortable? Is it because they don't like the mask they have? Is there an irritation? Is there something we can work through? Do they need a different amount of mask breaks, at least to start? So we certainly don't want it to be immediately punitive. We're going to ask questions about that and see if we can figure those things out. And that would not be, you know, the mask at all in our current environment should not be something that would be a punishment. Now, if there's a student that, you know, just, I'm not wearing a mask, you can't make me wear a mask in school at any time, that's a different scenario. So I hope you're encouraged to know that we would try to provide and I forgot to mention Mrs. Smith is here as well, and she works with the elementary students and addresses discipline, but I know she has a thoughtful approach to, you know, trying to get at the root cause of something. So that would be our first strategy. Is there something going on? And honestly, if a parent knows that they have some intolerance issues already, we would want to know that. And, you know, as the teacher assignments come out, things like that, as we finalize class lists, please share that with your child's classroom teacher. That would be a huge help. And they can perhaps work with you on a plan.
we do anticipate that there's gonna be that, and again, I think that's where we have to have that line of communication, and we have to be able to, is it a sensory issue, is it bothering, you know, those are the things that we're gonna have to figure out. But again, that's different than, I can wear the mask, but I'm not gonna just because I don't want to.
Right.
You know, and again, I'm not turning this into a political thing. This is about what we feel is safe for everybody, and we have to think about the whole group instead of, you know, and that's what we think is best.
So we do want parents to know that if you know your child is not going to be comfortable or is going to, you know, be a persistent behaviorism, and I don't see this again with elementary students perhaps, but it, you know, could happen for a middle school or high school student, not even just a co-ed, placement or setting, you know, there might be some consideration to what does the school day look like for my child, which is, you know, that's not going to work for them. And we certainly, you know, our focus wants to be on learning and not consequences, but we also have to keep people inside the building safe.
Question about the specials. Will they be held in the classroom or will they be traveling to that?
So I'm just gonna say, just briefly, again, where we can, we're starting out very restrictive. And that's our commitment for September. So he's got some more coming up.
It's coming up, and I'll share kind of a mock schedule, what the teachers of kids day look like. Just the school day in general, arrival and dismissal. And again, these are all things that we still are, it's not gonna be typical. So we know we still got some things that we gotta work on as far as how we're getting everybody in here safely. It can't be the usual show up, unload, go in. We know that. There's screening protocols that we're gonna have to go through. And it's gonna be in conjunction with our transportation as well as the people that are transporting. We know that, and we anticipate that we're gonna kind of spread kids out. It's not gonna be coming through these doors, everybody at once. It's gonna be, we're gonna have certain grade levels through here, certain grade levels through here. But now we do have some different opportunities at this end anyways. Different opportunities down at the old elementary entrance, at the front of the building. And obviously, when we finalize all those plans, we will communicate that so people are aware of what those are. But there will be staggered, times when kids are leaving, dismissal and arrival, because again, we don't want to have a bottleneck where kids are congregating, where there could be, potential exposures and things like that. And obviously, we're trying to do that where again, Mrs. Dunn mentioned it, we have kind of separated the building in three, where our elementary kind of in one section, the middle school's kind of in one, and then our high school's kind of in a separate. And we're going to try to maintain that as best we can, and we think we can do that for that. Did you want to talk about?
We know we aren't going to be able to do like the students walk or gathering in the morning. We're really being so thoughtful about socially distanced transportation on the buses, socially distanced classroom setups. And so having students arrive to school earlier, much earlier than the opening bell is not going to be something we can safely supervise. So I would anticipate us trying to pin down a firm schedule for arrival times and dismissal times as we continue to gather information and communicating that out. But for a parent to expect that they would be able to drop their student off at 7:25 would not be likely. And in fact, we aren't going to offer the breakfast program as the breakfast program is. We cannot work through that process. So there would be no reason for any student to come in and eat breakfast in the building. What we will do is send a bag breakfast home with the students at dismissal time. So there would be no reason to get here in advance of 7:50 truly for a student to make sure that we are being safe and not gathering students. And we may also say we want to specify even more and have K2 enter the building at 7:50 and 3-5, wait in mom's car or on the school bus or stand outside the entrance, supervise with an aide and come in at another time because we really want to make sure that is systematically happening. And then if any of you have ever been down at the exit at dismissal, which we call the pickup site, all the students gathered together in our foyer and they wait, they watch for mom and dad. That will not be an option for us either. We will need to have some kind of a circumstance where the students are in our large group instruction room, which, is our morning meeting room or morning program site, elementary gym, it's been called many things. Supervised, socially distanced, and we radioed. Mrs. Dutton's mother is here to pick her up. Please send her to the lobby. We simply have to change all those systems and practices. If there was an opportunity for safe supervision outside, if day was night, we could try that, but we're developing those other systems. So you should expect changes to all of those different things.
There's questions in the stream, but I
Sure.
think we can take them at the end.
Okay.
Keep going
Yeah.
just because we're running a little.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but, so here's, I just want to share, this is kind of just a mock-up of, kind of what the day would look like, and I kind of put this down, and I know it's hard to see, but, this is really kind of the kids' day. Attendance is in the morning, it looks like a ELA block for a majority of our K-5 classes. We've allowed some flexibility in there to have the time that they typically need. And again, understanding that it's going to be different. especially for our K-1-2 students. You know, there's a lot of things inside that they normally would do and that we've trained our teachers on about group work and collaboration and sharing and all those things. And it's not going to be the same. And the teachers understand that, but at the same time, we have some pretty creative teachers. And we're going to do things as best we can, as normal as we can, because again, part of the learning for our younger students is yes, it's the ABCs and it's the 1, 2, 3s, but it's the social thing. And, you know, honestly, I worry about that more than the other stuff, because you learn so many social skills in those classrooms and how they interact with their peers and what's right, what's wrong. So that's going to be a challenge, you know, and I've had many conversations with our kindergarten teachers about that, and our first grade teachers, and they know that it's going to be different. They've got to kind of change, you know, some of the things that they would normally do. But again, I think we have the staff that they're going to be creative to allow that to happen so that we can promote those social things, because that is an important part of what we do here with our K-1 and 2 students. I do want to just point out, and I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, but you will notice at the end here, there has been some discussion about the date as far as the ending. And I guess I will say I've been an advocate for this because I think, one, if we are doing this and kids are in mask all day, we have a long day to begin with. So right now, currently, what we are planning for is a dismissal time of around 2:15, 2:25, somewhere in that neighborhood as a building, as a district-wide. You know, obviously we will stagger the dismissal time. The thought process is this: is one, we shorten the kids' day. We've been able to do that all the way up through, you know, K through 12. We can get the essential learning that we need for our students with that. But the other thing it will allow us to do is it has an uninterrupted planning period for our entire staff, where we will be able to provide PD. We will be able to look at our online resources. We will be able to talk about our virtual learning options. And it allows us to have those curriculum meetings that we are going to need to have, knowing that the circumstances are very different. And it's hard to do that in a K-12 building unless you do something like this, because it is impacting everybody. It's not impacting, you know, just elementary, it's impacting our middle school and our high school. And, you know, we have some very knowledgeable people in our building, one of them sitting right here in front, that with technology, and we need to be able to use our people internally to provide that professional development for our teachers. And, you know, the only way we'd be able to accomplish that is if we did something like this. So that is currently what we are planning for. Obviously, some of the things that we've asked from you from tonight, as far as the transportation, the virtual learning is going to impact that. But that is currently what the plan is for us.
Right. So the other part is that we want to make sure that if that happens, we know that all the pieces come together, because that is a big change for parents. And that's why you haven't heard any official yet communication, is because if we can't put pieces together with transportation and students going to other school districts or buildings or programs to make that work, we have to either move through that issue that we're seeing, or we have to go back to the full school day and find a different professional development model. I want to be very clear because, you know, candidly, my mother probably would ask this very question, but what is, you know, is there an impact to the taxpayer? What, you know, shortening the teacher's day? You know, are we still doing anything there? And Mr. Cuthbertson is shaking his head because it's not. What we've done in this model is, instead of giving teachers a planning period for a grading or meeting time in the middle of the day, we have moved it beyond the school day in an effort to even shave off 40 minutes of mask wearing for students. Now, yes, they would have to wear them on the bus going home, but it's still some time. If there's merit to that, we can pull the pieces together that might alleviate some of the mask wearing concerns as well. So that is one of the pieces we're trying to really finalize very quickly, because we know it has impacts to families and schedules.
So again, lunches, the way that we are again, initially planning for is that lunches will be delivered to classrooms and students will eat in the classroom. We feel like that's where we need to start, and obviously, as things progress, and I continue to say this is a living thing, and as we live through this, if we feel, and again, because I'm just being honest as a parent.
Yeah.
I would have a hard time saying my kid is going to be in this room all day long, not being able to move. That's going to be a hard pill to swallow, and we know that. So we want them to be able to do that, but again, we have to make sure that it's safe, and we have to make sure that kids understand procedures, protocols of when we do those things. And that's really the first part of what we're talking about is when we talk about restrictive, it's us building the capacity with our teachers and our students of this is how we are going to do things. This is how the protocols and procedures for lining up and going to where we need to go. And we need to be able to have time to do that. So the plan is right now, they will be delivered to the classroom, students will eat in the classroom, and then we will kind of see how that goes.
And we've talked about saying, obviously, our fifth graders are our experts in the elementary wing about how to go through the line, grab a bag lunch, even if we had an opportunity in October to say, you know what, fifth grade's got the routine, fourth grade's got a particularly small class, they've got the routine. And we can at least allow them to walk very safely up and get their own lunch and have that movement rate. We would want to evaluate those things, but the systems and the procedures and the social distancing and making sure a student knows how to navigate the lunch line would be very different for a kindergarten student as opposed to a fifth grader. So we're trying to be thoughtful about that.
Especially with our pre-K, they didn't have the opportunity with the closure. They didn't have that opportunity because usually our pre-K at the end of the year do go in to eat lunch to kind of get a feel for that. They didn't have that opportunity, so it'd be very hard to start that way. So I just wanted to show you some examples of what the rooms would look like. You know, obviously these are not complete by any means, but this is an example of what a kindergarten room setup would look like. Obviously, this is just the desk, and that would be they're 6 feet apart.
The next one has a little bit, we tried to capture different ones. So this one has the teacher's desk in. The things on the register are items that still need to be removed from the classroom. That's the analysis all teachers are doing. I have to give a shout out to them. Not only are we moving about 9 classrooms, in fact, in some cases of teachers who just got settled in, whether it be because of fire or they just got hired or we moved them to another assignment, but every teacher has come in, examined their classroom, what can stay, what do I need to have in storage, and they've separated these items in order to really make space for children in the room. And that's ongoing. If you went down the wing, you see everything that has to go in storage.
And here's just another example of a 3rd grade classroom. Again, just another example.
And that one is a room actually set up for 12, and we don't anticipate those numbers at this time. But that, you know, we were just trying to show you a model.
I'm going to just take some questions here from the screen. And some of these we kind of answered, but I will just reiterate. One is if a parent, if a positive case does occur in a class, are the teacher in the homeroom quarantine at home 14 days and taught virtually. So again, that goes back to what we talked about. The Department of Health has to help us with that.
Not necessarily is what I'm being told. It would depend on perhaps the length of students being together and a whole variety of things which haven't been explained to me. But we as superintendents in the region have asked that same question, because if that was the case, how far do you extend that? Is it the room they passed or students on the bus as well, and what cohort? So it's really going to be relying on other agencies for that guidance.
And that's kind of the background that they ask. They'll ask those questions. How long were you with the person? Was the mask on or off? What type of activities were you doing? Those are the questions that you would get. What about parents who can't provide virtual learning due to having to work if they get 14-day quarantine? Kids aren't going to be able to get tested for every symptom if doctor doesn't sign off. I think that was just a statement. Weather permitting, will PE be held outdoors without mask or recess? And yes, if we can do that, and obviously that's, I'm encouraging our staff to do that. You know, for example, I'll just share this, you know, part of the conversation I had with our kindergarten staff, and we were talking about what to do. They're looking at ordering like yoga mats for each kid with a little stand, so that, you know, it's time to go outside, they get their yoga mat, they have a comfortable place, they can socially distance, they have a workstation. The other thing I should mention is that, you know, we do plan on having Chromebooks for every kid, K through 12. Those will be in K through 5, they're in the classrooms. 6, 8, they'll be in their classrooms, and then 9 through 12 will have them home. So we do anticipate that, you know, again, we have to be prepared for that. If we do go virtual, all virtual, the governor shuts us down, and we are prepared for that in the sense that kids will have Chromebooks. The other issue will be come into play is the access that we have at home. We need to provide a hotspot to parents if the internet is not good. We do have some of those. You know, and there's a lot of those things that we, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen, but, you know, we have to be prepared for that, and we are prepared for that. I just asked about the cushions. Yes, so that there is some classrooms that already have those, either the yoga mats or cushions. That was one of the questions. This is, if you sign up for virtual learning at the beginning of school that isn't working for your student, can they come back to the classroom at any time?
But we are asking parents to make a 10-week commitment. Some schools are doing semester long, we're doing first marking period, and we're simply asking that so that we can make sure our classroom numbers are equipped and, you know, we can accommodate those changes. And so that is one of the commitments in the paperwork that we distributed this evening. So I certainly can post some of those assurances for those at home who don't have it. I thought I might be able to do some additional postings in between the meetings, but I will do them after the second meeting this evening so parents can see what they would be committing to. But we're talking about 10 weeks. On the flip side of that, the district is also hoping to reserve the right to, and this is indicated on the form, if a parent chooses virtual learning and they're not showing up for class, they're not reporting for attendance, or their academics are declining, we intend to have conversations with families about this child needs to come back to school. Let's figure out, can we do this safely? What would it look like? Are there portions of the school day? How can we, you know, figure out, is there a smaller classroom? We need to be able to make sure that not only are students learning inside the building, but outside the building in the models we're providing. And I thought you had a question.
Just in regards to the mask break of eating lunch in the classroom, I assume it will only be one kid at a time removing their mask and eating, and the other kid. I mean, I'm assuming they're not all eating lunch at the same time, because they're going to be purposeful and putting their own masks, they all take them off at once.
So that's a good question. Those are some of the unknowns. We may do something different in terms of 4th or 5th grade, in terms of, do they eat in the elementary gym in a classroom location? How do we separate students? Is there an opportunity for one class if the cafeteria is empty otherwise to eat in a separate setting? If something there would change, because we've talked about classroom for September, it would be at an intermediate grade level, so 3rd, 4th, or 5th, and we would communicate that to parents. So
as far as a student, I understand that in terms of like remote learning and how they come to school. But say a child starts at school and it's just, I mean, at this point, they have to do 4 times what we just done, stay still for 6 hours with a mask on. It becomes too much for that child after the first 3 days or 4 days. And you're seeing a change in the child's behavior, or exhausted, stressed. At that time, can we opt to teach remotely at that point?
we definitely want to have a conversation with you about what it is that's not working before we just went to that, to be honest about it, because it might be a situation that other students are experiencing, but they're not sharing in the same way. So before a parent went to that step, we would very much welcome a conversation about what the circumstances are. Maybe it's something we've detected on our end, but it might also be something, anxiety, worry on your end, and we want to know. So please have that conversation with us. So it probably in that model, if we're basing our numbers of social distancing on expecting, erring on the side of everyone being here, if you chose for a month or the next marking period or mid-marking period to remove your child for virtual, that's not so much of a transportation or busing issue. If it's in the best interest of the student, we would want to support that. Yes,
So these scan the kids and it takes their temperature.
yeah, yeah.
Is anyone standing there to see what the temperature reads?
There's going to be somebody monitoring the device to make sure students pass through it clearly. Because
Well, so a kid passes through it and it's 100 and they're already in their classroom. I mean, is that kid being stopped from going to their classroom and they go to the isolation room?
if it has that functionality, and I don't know, if it doesn't, then we're gonna have to change how we intend to implement it, and that's why we want to see how quickly an alert goes. My understanding is Mrs. Ozak wouldn't get an email for anyone whose temperature is okay.
Right, but so the kid's already come in by the scan and she's at a temperature of 101.
No, they're gonna do it at the door. They're gonna do it at the door.
I understand that.
There'd
Yeah,
be somebody there.
By the time Mrs. Ozak
Oh,
gets
yeah.
the email.
well,
There'd be somebody there.
yes,
And again, this is one model. I mean, obviously, you got,
Right.
shot what you did, you got
Right.
shot. There's gonna be, we are gonna have to rely on our PPS people in some regards to kind of monitor those entryways, whether they're monitoring that or they have the temperature check.
Right.
We are planning for that, because no, we are not, if a kid does register, no, that's where that's where the isolation would go. That's a symptom, they'd have to go.
Okay.
They would not go to the classroom.
no.
Legally, they'd be stopped at that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
That's
Are
the
you
rule.
hiring another nurse?
We are honestly exploring that, to be honest about it, yes.
Because that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. So the way we're exploring it is happening two ways, the back end here. And that is one, as a precautionary measure, asking the BOCES to provide us with that person as an itinerant person, much like our speech therapist or something. They have an LPN program, they have a nursing program, so that's one model. And we may overlap too. And the other one is hiring our own. And so, processes have started for both of those things. Again, these parents here, though some were in elementary school when I was first year, so some know me, but I like to have a backup. I like to have cautious something, to fall back on, because it's also a reality. If Mrs. Ozak has symptoms, we have to have a school nurse to open. So yes,
And then
identified a very big need, and graciously, the board has supported that process and that exploration. And
The other piece to this is, we have to have parents help us. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm sorry.
the CDC recommendation, just so if you have, the CDC recommendation is they don't even want school screening. They want the parents, because by the time they get here, it's too late, right? But we know that that's not gonna happen. We need parents to help us screen at home, so they don't send a kid that has those symptoms.
Right, just
Well,
because.
we know that's not gonna happen.
Parents to do that? Have you sent out any information advising parents that that's what they need to do?
No, not yet, because we feel like we initially thought that passive, can you sign this form, send it back to us and say, I understand it's my responsibility to screen every day. If my child had failed my home screening test, I'm not sending them to school. We're going to, hold you all sorts of obligations there that you are guaranteeing that we screened at home. Then we got the advice just yesterday, honestly, that will not suffice. That one-time form is not going to provide, and that makes sense, really, any assurance to not only you as another parent that I'm doing it every day, but to the teacher who's in the classroom like that. That's fine, but it's causing us to regroup and say, okay, can we ask parents to fill out that Google form on the website and say, yes, I screened my child today. Every day? You're gonna fill that out before you come to school? I mean, I see my siblings with children and, you know, the busyness of their households in the morning. Now they're gonna have to also fill out a Google form, remember to pack a mask and all those things. I'm trying to figure out that process, but we need parents to be a partner in this because we don't want it to just be parents relying on this. We don't want them to necessarily get to our door if they're ill so that we don't have to call families to come get them. So.
And who will man the isolation rooms? Like, whose room should be?
Right, so that's, ideally for me, if I could pull these staffing pieces together with the BOCES and internal hiring, someone in the nursing field. It's just my own comfort level. And I will tell you, that my mother was a school nurse in elementary school and middle school, so I know the load, even in a normal school year for food BOCES and all those things, and what challenges you face. So it will be someone medically trained if I have a choice. Now, some schools are using trained teacher aides to supervise some of the rooms where they are consulting with the school nurse who works with the Department of Health and Parents. If we can get a medically trained person, whether an LPN and nurse in these variety of models, that is my preference because it's important for us to be able to say, you're sending your child to school, we are providing an environment where you all feel that safe. And and people can adequately treat students even for an ice pack because they fell in PE class. So we've talked about multiple locations for a second treatment site in addition to the supervised isolation room. If we got to a point of having 4 isolation rooms and 2 nursing offices in the site building, some of those would have to be supervised by aides, I'm sure, because there is a nursing shortage in the region. Yes.
Just wondering,
Well,
okay.
Yeah, she's been
I'm sorry,
over there.
I'm sorry, I couldn't see you.
Sorry, go ahead. And I think there's one back there, right?
What resources are you going to be using for reading? What resources will you be using to read for reading?
So our
Because
K,
they're not going to be able to share them up, so what are they going to be using to learn how to read for kindergarten and stuff?
right, so that's part of the discussion I've had with teachers. We currently are K through 2 use Super Kids, and they will continue to use that. Part of that program is they do have level readers. So part of their task is to come up with and make sure that we have enough, if there is one for each, you know, we're obviously not going to be able to provide one for each level reader. But I guess I will say we are pretty fortunate in the sense that we do have those resources here. And they know that they need, if they need to have extra, that's part of what they've been doing is we're going through those resources. What do I need more of? For example, with our math, every kid is going to get their own manipulative kit. It's not going to be shared. Same thing with ELA. If there's a kit that they need for ELA, the teachers are going to have to, again, part of it is doing some diagnostic testing with the kids to see what level they're at, and then provide those level readers for that kid that they will not share. And the teachers are doing that work.
Will you be using like other programs too, like Maya or Epic or any of those other? Like
Yes.
Mine, like I don't know if you guys have iPads or not, but.
What was it? I didn't hear you.
I don't know if you have iPads or not either, if
We do.
you're doing Google Chrome one-to-one or.
We have them, but we honestly are starting to expire them because the
Yeah.
teachers prefer the Chromebooks, but we have some.
So we do have other resources that we will be using, online resources. For example, last year, kindergarten was using a Seesaw, those type of things will be happening. But the other part of this is they gotta be about 2D compliant, which is a whole other bear.
I know
just-
Epic's not, but mine on it.
So, and those teachers have those resources, and they've talked about those resources, so, yeah.
Thank you.
What about the shared bathrooms?
So that's a good question. So right now, if you were going to an elementary classroom, there's 2 bathrooms, boy, girl. Right now, I think the plan is we are going to designate 1 bathroom for the classroom. So it's not going to be, it's not going to be cutting through. This would be, Mrs. Work's classroom. And then on top of that, you know, part of this is we have to have regularly clean those bathrooms. So part of that scheduling is going to be with looking at where those breaks are so that we can get somebody down there to just give it a cleaning. And again, going through this process, we've learned quite a bit about cleaning, disinfecting, and sanitizing. So we know that at the end of the day, we have to disinfect everything. That's the deep clean, which we will do. But throughout the day, there's going to be those cleanings that happen as we wipe things down to make that happen. I think there's one back there.
So I just wanted to go back real quick about the question as far as if we choose to send our students to school and then we feel comfortable in 2 days and we decide we want to result. I appreciate the fact that you want to hear from us and you want to talk that through, but we need to know that is really an option. And where I'm coming from is I have other children and I have a certified daycare that would have to be willing to take the on if this occurs, and I know that it's a possibility moving forward, but I need to have some sort of plan, and other parents in the same boat. There's other Poland parents that also utilize that daycare, we have children in the same grade and together, where we might have to be able to say that these 3 students, ensure that these 3 students have the same teacher, because they're going to have to do the virtual learning that way if we're going to continue to work as parents. So that's where my concern is. I want to make sure that that's an option for us as parents.
Yeah.
That we can have that conversation if it needs to be.
Absolutely. What we really don't want is in, out, in, out, in, out. You know, it may end up that way because that's how the cycles will go. But if we can limit that for some amount of predictability for teachers about who's going to be learning in school, that would be huge. Also, I don't know if you've had a conversation with Mr. Cuthbertson about the daycare piece, but, you know, I would encourage you to do that so they can explore that before he finalizes the class list. Not something I thought of and very important to our conversations if we can accommodate that. So thank you.
Right, because we have a lot of expectations on our daycare providers and this, just like the teachers, but there's no way that she can say that to 3 of us as parents and families.
Yes.
With different teachers, because she won't be able to accommodate that.
Right. Well, thank you. It's really nothing I thought of for sure.
No, and I actually got an email today from a parent asking about that question about, you know, and I'm in the same boat with my own kids about childcare, you know, working with families, working with a daycare provider. We certainly want to know those things because I'm going to try to be as accommodating as we possibly can. That's where it gets tricky because we could say that the kids are with this group of kids in school, then they go to daycare and they're with everybody. But that's why I said when we're open, we're open. But those conversations would be helpful because again, I think one of the questions that I'm getting mostly teachers asking, where are the class lists? When are the class lists coming? And I understand the anxiety with that because teachers want to prepare. But at the same time, I'm not going to hand out class lists and then I find out, like your situation, that now I'm going to have 30% of my second graders not here. Now I got to redo class lists. It's just going to create more frustration for you, for the teachers, and for everybody. So those are the conversations that I need to have before I say these are the finalized lists that I can give to, you know, teachers and to parents. So if you email me those things, that would help me. Again, I can't guarantee all those things, but I try to accommodate because again, we know the circumstances are like this, right? So.
We also recognize that you are new to school in some cases. You might be, you know, kindergarten, you're just developing your relationship with the school. And so in the next 2 weeks, I mean, we really pushed hard to be right out in front of having these meetings to allow parents to get information and make decisions, but also to reach out back to us. So if a parent said, please, I just need to see a possible first grade classroom. Is there any ability that we can see the classroom, what procedures, you know, bathroom situation, you don't know our building? Please, and you're teetering about, am I comfortable with this particularly? Sending my child, not sending my child, please reach out to us. You know, we will be available as we can to make those things happen. And we do, you know, we certainly can't tell you there aren't going to be issues that we face. You know, we wish we could give every family a guarantee that even with the measures, we're putting in place that we're going to have a safe school year. Reality is, there's probably very likely someone in this room that has no symptoms and is, COVID positive. Those are some of the numbers that the health department is sharing with me. So we have to put precautions in place to say, what can we do to prevent the rest of us getting ill? But if it's really just a matter of asking questions, having a meeting, sitting down with a class and teacher wants to get a name, please do that. Really, we would want that.
Yep, I have 2 questions again. So have you guys designated like a specific elevated temperature? Because I'm thinking about it, if they're standing in line to get their temps taken and their mask is on, I know I'm sitting here and I'm sweating profusely. So I'm sure that my temperature would be elevated. Have you guys taken that into consideration at all?
State guidance is 100.4.
100.4?
That's what it is.
Okay. My other question is, since the kids aren't going to have access to water fountains, is there anything in the works, water or anything that we provide in a class?
So classroom supply list will provide that. Obviously, we want the kids to have a water bottle. I'm sure that, I had a conversation with a kindergarten teacher today, the screw top water bottle is probably not going to be good for those kids. So they're going to say, we recommend this. It's certainly not something that you have to buy, but they would certainly recommend some. But, I would tell you right now, if you can get a water bottle and you can provide that for your child, I would certainly want you to do that. That would be one thing that you should do. We will have opportunities for kids to fill the water because that will still be an option for us, but they're just not going to be able to use the actual water.
The bubbler will be turned off.
Yep.
We have many bottle fillers, and maybe that would be one of the movement rights that could be allowed if it was scheduled very contained.
We didn't talk about this, but, the school will have masks available.
Yep.
Something happens to your child's mask, we will have those for it. We obviously encourage you to give them a mask that they're comfortable with, but there's backups here for staff and students, so we will have those things here for us if something does happen.
Do you know when the pilots are gonna come out?
Say that again?
Do you have an idea when the pilots are gonna come out?
Yeah, so the teachers have provided me basic information as far as a grade level. And again, this is where it gets tricky because every teacher is a little different. Every teacher has their own little thing that they'd like to have. I'm gonna post that on the website as far as, like, for example, first grade. These are the basic supplies. All the first grade teachers are telling us they need, X, Y, and Z. And then as the class lists get distributed, I'm sure you'll be getting a letter from your teacher that maybe will get more specific about those things. But, for the most part, they're pretty much similar. But, for example, Mrs. I keep using Mrs. Rourke, who I spoke with today, her thing was, she has the frog room. She may want you to have, buy a green folder or something, you know what I mean? But those are the things that, but for the most part, I'm going to post that on the website as soon as I get it complete. So you'll have at least an idea of what you can start looking for.
And our students don't show up the
Yeah,
first day
and
without
that's
some
fine.
of those things.
Yeah.
They're, that should not be a concern.
No.
Our teachers understand these are different times and the
And-
timelines are all shifting.
And I'm just gonna share this, I get supply list. One of the things my kid, my teacher's kids asked was pencils. So it was 36 pencils. So we bought 36 pencils. We got this stuff home after the closure. I had 35 pencils and a pencil this short. So like some of the things they ask for, you don't necessarily need all that, but it's good to know, don't stress it.
Sharing of materials, because there's no sharing of materials that it's gonna, like, you're gonna have to have stock.
Yep.
So if it's for the year, instead of 1 crayon box that they would normally share 4 crayon boxes.
Yep.
Because they're going through, or they're breaking them, or,
Yep.
and they're like, or they expensive, so we kind of like it now, it's cheap.
And some of our teachers, part of their request for me was to provide that, so it takes it off the parents. So for example, if it's a pencil box, some teachers are asking that we get 2 pencil boxes, so we have one for ELA and one for maths and keep their stuff. So the teachers will be more specific, but generally, they're gonna have a list that I will post once I get it. And I just sent it out to them. I'm just waiting for a couple of grade levels. I'd like to be able to post everybody at the same time. Any other questions? I know this is, it's been a longer meeting than we thought, but again, For us, this is important that we have the dialogue with you to kind of work through some of these things.
Absolutely. And please, you know, we didn't
Email.
post our contact information, but please use it. We're happy to take your questions.
You mentioned earlier, you're going to provide Chromebooks for all the students. Now that includes the ones that would be, say, the parents had to have them learn virtual, that includes them as well, correct?
If they're requested,
If they're
we found
requested.
in the spring, you know, that some students had the equipment that they preferred to use or parents preferred for them to use. So what we wouldn't, you know, we have enough to equip all our students, but we didn't have to use all our equipment in the spring. Not all students took it. So yes,
If it's requested, we would.
that's right. Yep.
And again, anything,
Just assuming, you know, you're using it for instances that'll be communicated to.
Yes, yes.
yes,
Yes, yes, and we will also put some, whether a banner or some signage, so it's visibly, seen from the road or different things. We have new families enrolling. You might have some information and know what we mean by the elementary entrance, so we need to give some prompts and cues, to families that may not know, you know, building language that some of us are more familiar with, so we'll be doing some things like that as well.
okay.
So appreciative of your time. Thank you very much. And if you can leave any of the information in front of the green paper this evening, we are happy to collect it. If you want to take it home, as I expect you may, talk about it as a family, please do that.
Timeline.
Yeah, ideally by next, Thursday, I think is really when we would want it no later than Thursday. We are exploring putting in a drop box in the front circle so people don't have to come in the building, be bound to it, much like the budget vote. So during the day when people are here, people can just drive by, toss it in the box, and it'll be out under the canopy. Thank you.
Give them a pen.
I can sanitize them, honestly.
I don't care about that.
That's what I think.
But it's a lot of
Yes.
things.
How are you? How are you? No, that's what I think.
So,
That's what I think. Perfect, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
this one.
Seriously.
There you go.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I can see the video when I'm on my
I'm just, but I haven't been in there.
No, I can see it on my laptop right there, so.
Oh, did they go? How good.
Yes, just trying to get the PowerPoint up there.
It may have some more capabilities because it's a new install, so.
The project came through last week.
Yeah. We get it through. From this.
Oh, no. Sure. Trying to get to the first up.
But it's just someplace somebody's installed. Our. Yeah.
I'm gonna change that. Yeah. We're good. I'm back to click through live. All right, okay. Can you see it? Oh, yeah, there you go. That's better. Okay, sounds good. Thank you. I am on mute. I did. Okay. We're good to go.
Okay, nobody outside, so appreciate your patience, waiting to come in. The questions were good for the last group, and we certainly want to allow as much time for that as we could. We also wanted to sanitize the seating between our sessions with some disinfectant, so. And as, you know, we attempted to do in the last meeting as well, we want to find opportunities for you to ask us questions and find some information that you may need. If we know we have it on a future slide, we'll let you know that too, because it might be clear with the language coming up on our slide. So, we wanted to develop a review of what's in the yellow envelope that you have. We hope to go over what made reopening possible for PCS in a different way than maybe possible at other schools in our region. And also the K-5 schedule. And then some opportunity for questions. We've added some photographs in our presentation as well. So I'm not sure, did they see that or not?
That's just.
So inside the yellow envelope, we put an intentional space holder inside, and that's a green piece of paper. So the green piece of paper divides two specific sections behind the green paper are things we always send home or mail to parents in September when school is reopening. Things like technology use, code of conduct summary, an insurance about the handbook, some information from Mr. Cuthbertson, some information from our food service program. That is not necessarily anything about this evening, but it's important for us to continue enrollment processes in school, so we took advantage of trying to distribute that to as many parents as we could this evening. In front of that green letter are some other things that some we hope if you can give us information tonight, you will. So if you go to the next slide, I think I missed this one, but so there's two colored papers. These, the blue and the yellow, are about transportation. We tried to make this as easy to get information from parents as we could. We pre-labeled these forms so that you didn't have to do a lot of filling it out. That will also help us make sure that we get feedback from families and once per household kind of situation, perhaps follow up with an additional calling system or reminder to get information to us if we don't get a good return rate. But these two forms are just about transportation. The easy one is the yellow one. So there are families who have already said to us, we're not comfortable riding the buses. We might be comfortable coming to school, but we don't want to use your transportation this year. Please don't even plan us on a route. But that might apply to more families. So we're asking parents, if that is true, to let us know. And we will take your child's seat basically off the bus and either spread out or shuffle routes or use that space if we have a pre-K program, because right now we're not certain where to accommodate pre-K seating and pre-K booster seats and things like that. That information will help us continue to plan the bus route. We're also asking if you have students that are drivers to let us know if they're going to drive to school every day. And we have students like that in high school, but if we can get parents to tell us that's their commitment for the year, then again, another seat, we don't have to guess on that. If neither of those things apply to you, you can throw this out or give me your blank form. You don't have to turn it in. The blue form we're trying to gather information about changing bus routes and how we can accommodate that. And so we've asked parents to give us a little bit of input. We know we have to restrict the movements on buses so that we know that we can accommodate the students that are scheduled on that route, whose residences are on that route. So we're asking parents what might work if we want you to make a commitment. Can you give us a commitment of planning out your transportation 10 days out, a month out, six weeks out, or maybe this doesn't apply to you either because you never change your transportation. That's helpful to us too, because we do have some students that ride 5 buses during the course of the school week because of how their daycare or family situation might be for, when I see I have a typo, so that's annoying in my blue form. So this will help us to know what considerations we should make. We definitely want to be able to be flexible. We are one of the few school districts in the region, and I think even in our neighboring regions, who has such an extensive bus note system. If we can continue to accommodate that while still serving our students and have some predictability, we would like to consider that. But with any of these commitments, we are asking that if you were to make a change, that you alert us 5 days ahead. Are there always circumstances and emergencies? Yes, but for the most part, we need to make sure there's a seat before we make a change and tell a parent that we're going to move around and things like that. So if you would fill this out, we have not made a firm decision yet about the transportation movement and bus notes. It will help us to do that. Then the other two white papers function together. So this is a letter about what a virtual learning experience would be if you are choosing that for your child this year. In initial conversations we've had with parents who have called and said, for whatever reason, I'm not able to send my child to school because of health conditions in the family or because of my own child's health condition. And we just want to make parents aware what the virtual model will have to look like and may be required in some instances because of state parameters for the current school year. So this has elements of what the program will look like if you are choosing virtual. And this other form, once you read the letter and assurances, is a commitment to make for parents for 10 weeks of remote learning. Some schools are doing first semester, so they're going to the end of January. I know West Canada is doing 10 weeks as well. It's not consistent across the region, but we recognize things could change. But we're also trying to have some predictability where students aren't perhaps in and out, other than if they're experiencing an issue related to symptoms or family being quarantined or something like that. So we have asked for ideally all these papers back by Thursday of next week to allow us to continue to take steps for planning. We know that isn't necessarily easy with the mail delivery system, and we want to make it where parents don't even have to mask up, make sure somebody's here at the building. So we will intend to put a drop box out of the canopy each day, and parents can put their form in that without having to buzz in, and we'll pull it in at the end of the day at a designated time. When I know what time the cleaner will pull it in, I'll communicate that, because I wouldn't want you to drive to the school, think you're going to use the drop box, and it's not here. We were able to do 5 o'clock for the budget vote. I'm going to hope for something like that, but I haven't confirmed it. So if you already know what you feel about any of these things, you can leave it with us. Some of the last group did, but I also know it's a family conversation. So if you need to take these items home, have a conversation with your spouse or family members about what can be accommodated, we definitely want you to do that. So those are the things in the packet, and the rest of the meeting really uses the PowerPoint presentation. So we aren't necessarily going to refer to these things unless you ask us specific questions about them. So if you want to set them aside, you certainly can.
So I just want to just acknowledge, one, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And I do want to, this is important to get the feedback, and I do want to treat this as an open dialogue because it's important we get that information. The people that are at home that are watching the stream, feel free to use the chat box at the side. And as we go through, I'll be constantly looking at this. If there's questions that are coming out, I will be sharing that so that I can try to answer everybody's questions as we go through here. I do understand the anxiety that people are having. I mean, it's evident people have questions. There's a lot of unknowns. We're trying to answer some of those unknowns tonight, but I must be honest that we still have a lot of questions ourselves. But again, when we talked about reopening the school and what that would look like, we had to do some data and look at some things. And I think we're very fortunate, and as Mrs. Dutton kind of pointed out, we're one of the few districts that are allowed or could have the possibility of having our kids back in the building. Some districts were not even given that choice at all. Some are just completely remote. And I know that all of you here and people that are watching and all of our families have some decisions they've got to make. And they're big decisions, but hopefully we can answer some of those questions. And I will preface everything with, my number one job here, Mrs. Dutton's number one job, our Board of Education, Mrs. Smith, who's back here, one of our other administrators. Our biggest job that we have is to make sure that your kids are safe in school. They can't learn if they don't feel safe. So, understand that we put a lot of thought into this. No plan is perfect. I think, looking at other plans, looking at our plan, obviously there's a lot of things out there. So, but again, when we put this together, as a parent first, I want to do what's right for your kids. I want to make sure that they are safe in school. We think we have a plan that can do that, but ultimately it is your choice. So just looking at this as some of the data that we look at is back in 2000, the PCS population was about 750 students. In 2003, there was an improvement project on what was currently the 6th grade wing. It's been the math science for middle school. It's been named different things, but in that project, we actually grew in square footage of our building capacity by about 11,000 square feet. So at the time, we had about 750. We grew about 11,000 square feet. And I guess we're very fortunate that we were in another capital project the past couple of years, which is starting to wrap up, as you can see. But you look at our population this year in the 2020 school year, currently enrolled, we have roughly about 480 students in the building. And with that capital project, we've actually grew another 10,000 square foot with some of these additions that we've had. On top of that, we've looked at, schedules and teacher schedules, and we've had some, again, fortunate circumstances where we've had some ability that we've had some staff with some room in their schedules, or we're able to be flexible. Hence why we've come up with the plan of this return to school. So as you know, we made a very conscious effort a couple of years ago with our younger students, our primary students, to have smaller class sizes. At the K-1-2 level, we thought it was very important to have those small class sizes so that teachers could work individually with kids, be able to focus on what gaps are there. And we made that effort, and we did that. And kind of when doing that, it's kind of the model that we've kind of built our reopening plan with, is that we can make and have smaller class sizes to be able to get our kids into the building, have them socially distanced, have it safe for them in the classroom. That's what we're trying to do. So as you can see from this slide, currently the plan is, and this is with everybody coming back. We know that there's going to be maybe some that choose virtual. That's fine. But this is with everybody coming back in the building. Kindergarten, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade would be 4 sections. We looked at those numbers and felt like, one, we could push it, but we wanted to have some flexibility with our class sizes if we get in new enrollments, so that we have that flexibility to be able to add students if we needed to add them. 4th grade is kind of the anomaly for us. It's a very small cohort. Right now, currently, it's about 21 kids. So I wouldn't need to break that into any further groups. So you would be looking at 2 sections for 4th grade. And then grades 1 and 5, again, they're a little bit smaller. We would be able to manage those and keep with 3 sections. So number-wise, this is what we'd be looking at for your classroom. So for kindergarten, if we did it for 4, and again, this is assuming everybody's coming back to the building, they would have class sizes of roughly 9 to 10. Grade 1 would be about 10, 11. Grade 4 would be about 10, 11 as well. Grade 3 is about 10. So as you can see, we've done that work to make sure that the class sizes are small, where we can have the social distancing that we need, and still provide the instruction that we need for the kids. There was a lot of guidance that was given to us from state ed that we got through, and part of that guidance was looking at square footage of rooms and what you could probably fit into a room. So for example, basically the guidance tells us that it's about 20 square foot per person in that space. And it's got to be usable space, because again, you look at a square footage in here, for example, it could be 1,000 square foot, but now you have the bleachers out, that's not usable square footage, so you have to take that into account. These numbers are definitely under that figure. And again, these numbers are there because we expect, just like always, we have new enrollments, and we may be able to have kids go into those rooms. So that's kind of currently what the breakdown of what would be in each of your child's classes when we come back to school.
It might be a good time to say, this is some of the reason why we've been reserving sending home the classroom assignments, because we're trying to monitor this very closely each week. And, you know, the kindergarten sections were more recently changed because if everyone who suggested they would be coming or enrolling was coming, we had to change plans. So I would say that one thing that might change this could be if a grade level had a stronger commitment to virtual learning, we might rethink this, but this is the current plan as of today. And
Yep, and that kind of brings me to some of these questions. I'm not going to go through all these questions because a lot of the questions are answered in the next couple slides, but I do think the big question that a lot of you may have is about virtual learning and what that would look like and what the options is for that. So one of the questions we're getting, how will the district offer remote learning and what student populations will remote learning be available to? Will remote learning look different than it was offered in the spring? Yes, you know, those are clear indicators from the governor that we need to provide that for those families. And again, this is why we're having these discussions. And again, it is your choice with that. But we will say that it is going to look quite different than it was in the spring. You know, we understand, and from the parent side and from the principal side of my hats here, it was challenging to say the least in both ends. So, you know, we know that needs to be very different. So what that's going to look like is basically, if you're choosing to do virtual, I want there to be clear understanding that the schedule is going to be the schedule. If your student is taking ELA from 8 to 10 in the morning, they need to be logged on virtually 8 to 10 for ELA.
visible.
Visible.
Yes.
So this time around, the teachers are gonna actually get on with the students. Yes, okay, because
Yes.
in the spring, nobody got on, well, Mrs. Crowell, I'm sorry, she did get on. None of the other teachers got on at all and just hammered them with all kinds of work. And I was not having a lot of home.
We took a lot of feedback from email or conversations and even challenges teachers had with the model and really said, how can we make this work? We know as quickly as we implemented that did create so many challenges for everyone, and we're trying to learn from those things that didn't go well. And we know this model is not going to fit everyone's needs either, but I think there'll be some more predictability, and so that's certainly our.
So on top of that, you know, again, I want to be very clear that it's going to follow their schedule like they would be here at school. So when they take PE, they're going to have to take PE. When they eat lunch, they're going to have to eat lunch at that time. When it's time to go for, you know, math, it's going to be math time. So that is going to kind of be how we call it. Now, obviously, some good conversation with the other group is about some of these other circumstances that come up as it relates to an exposure. We'll work through those, okay? But I just talking now, if you choose remote and that's what you're choosing, this is what it's going to be. Because again, on the other end of this is the state is telling us we need to have attendance and accountability for that. And in order to do that, the only way that we can do that is by doing the schedule as the schedule, okay? You know, and again, discussion with teachers, they know that this is there. And the other thing that I think is very important that we all understand is this could be a thing where we have in and outs. You know, there's going to be situations where potentially your family was exposed and the Department of Health says to us that you need to be quarantined for 14 days. Now, typically
They would tell you that.
Yeah, no, they would tell you that, right? And, you know, we understand that, and, you know, we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared if the state shuts it down again and be able to go all remote, and we would keep this as is. So that is what the current plan would look like for virtual learning. Yeah.
I plan on sending my kids back, but I'm just wondering if there is an exposure, are all the rooms equipped with cameras?
Yes, we're making those purchases. That's some of the technology that we have purchased. Yes, those are some of the challenges where some had them and some did not. We didn't know how valuable they were. So yes, good question.
So, you know, the plan is we see it, and again, part of that is making sure we have the equipment, which we do have. We can make it work, but we want to make sure that it's working better than what it was. is that there would be the camera, there would be the audio, the student would be logged in, they would be able to see what's going on with the teacher, they'd be able to see the whiteboard that the teacher's working on, be able to have interactions, things like that. Obviously, it's not going to be the same because you're not physically there, and there are going to be certain limitations because we can't have the camera in every single place. But that would be what we would try to do, so that we can make sure that it's a conducive learning environment for those people that are virtual.
What about people that are rural that lose connection all the time?
So we do have some hotspots that we would certainly want you to try, even before school opens. If you had an issue like that and we thought perhaps one of the equipment items that we have might be helpful to you, or you think it might be and you haven't tried it, please contact us.
So
Because we had issues in the spring.
absolutely. And, I'll be honest with you, like, you may not have Wi-Fi and we could say we're gonna give you a hotspot, but you may not have good cell service and that's not gonna work for you either. That's some of the barriers that we're all gonna face. And we've gotta figure how that's gonna work. And part of the plan that we had to come up with was identifying those situations, like who are the kids or the families that really need, the hotspot or better internet connection. And I think that's kind of what we've been talking about, is how we're gonna navigate that, because we know that potentially could be an issue again. But I think that's where we have to draw on community, community companies and different things like that.
And you could test that, we honestly, any parent could contact us and we would very likely be able to have the equipment ready and, signed out to a parent in a day's time. So if that's something that might be a barrier for making a decision that you might think is best for your family, please don't hesitate to call us and just try these things. We have several that are just on hand. We thought they might be good solutions to teachers, some clerical staff when no one could be in the building, so we distributed them to people. We collected them. They're here on our campus. We would prefer they be used if that helps, to support learning for our families.
The second question on here is about remote learning opportunities for students with disabilities, ELL students, homeless students, to ensure equity. And that is something that the district has to do. Like if IEPs are stated as such, we have to provide those services in the IEP. So that's something that, as a remote learner, that should not be a barrier. But obviously, there's certain things that go with that. So again, we have to work through those things to see if it's something like a technology issue, is that the barrier of why, whatever it is. But if it's a service that is provided, the district still needs to provide that service if it is a remote situation. These other ones are going to come up in these other slides, so I'll kind of come back to them as we go through these slides. But this first one is really, part of the governor's guidance to us was, looking at the testing piece or what that looks like in your tracing piece. So that's kind of what the next couple of slides are about. And again, the question was, what scenarios will require students or staff to be tested for COVID-19? So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. Sure. And then the sites there.
Sure. So this piece is part of one of the requirements that schools needed to do with the guidance that came out Friday of last week. Once schools could reopen, and that was schools needed to communicate to parents more broadly about their reopening plans. And so that's why we put these meetings in place. They also needed to alert families about testing and possible testing sites in their region and the protocols for contact tracing. So these information items about testing and contact tracing, some of this information only came to the superintendents in our region yesterday, and there's a meeting this week with local and regional health departments. There may be additional information that comes from that meeting. We've been asked to watch for more information because we're regularly seeking clarification when we get information that is challenging for us to implement in this setting. So at this time, we wanted to alert, how we will work with the County Department of Health, to inform us regularly about testing sites. Right now, right before the meeting this evening for the first group, we got information about where the testing sites known in Herkimer County were from the Department of Health. And then in the last session, someone working in the medical field shared some additional locations. So I'm going to add that information as well. I see this being placed 2 places on our website, the COVID information on the sidebar, but also a second place for students and parents might make sense. So I'm a little concerned that COVID listing might get busy enough that to place it in a couple of places so parents might be able to find it if they check applicable topics would be our goal. And so the information that we got from the State Health Department on this slide. So one of the items for clarification we were asking about was, we were told if someone is symptomatic that the diagnostic test was the test that would be necessary for someone to come back to school before other information came to us. So there are different kinds of tests. This is something that I wasn't aware of, that they were going to specify a certain type. And so that's one of the clarifications that the region is asking for, because parents may take a child or a staff member may get another test, and if that is not going to suffice for insurance for us, that's going to be very frustrating to people. So the locations we have right now are Bassett, Primary Agent Care, Griffith, and the parent in the last group is part of the Bassett network, and she said that WellNow is also doing the diagnostic type, and each of these, I have indicated what type of testing they do, and if that information changes, we will adjust the website. And this slide, I didn't have time in between the sessions, but actually the whole presentation will be posted under the COVID link in the sidebar so that you can review these and have these. Some of these have a cost. The one currently at Griffiths, I'm being told, is free. And I made a indication to the last group that I would add Oneida County sites as well, because some of us may work in Oneida County or live or work or live closer to that area, and maybe that's just as easy for families. So we'll continue to add as we get information.
You know, a lot of the questions we got in the previous session, and it relates back to some of these FAQs that we put down was, you know, what are the protocols in the case of a suspected positive case of a student coming in? You know, and right now, the guidance that we're getting is as we get kids and there's symptoms. And again, hopefully parents are helping with that as far as screening kids. They're not sending them to school, but we know that that doesn't always happen, and we have safeguards here to do that. But let's say the kid does come to school, you know, we up here at the front of the, in front here is kind of one of the systems that we're going to be using as kids come in for screening. Basically, it'll be able to have the kid stand in front of it, or read the temperature, and it will tell us what the temperature is, okay? There's also the guns that you got, you know, shot with as you, I don't want to say that, it sounds bad, but as you came in, you got tested as you came in. If there's a suspected that they're over the 104 or 100.4, which is the threshold the state is giving us, you know, right now, if there's any of those symptoms, and there's been symptoms added as we go, and I know the state is working on trying to provide those exact symptoms because they have been so vast. That the student is supposed to be isolated, and that's what they would do. They would go, we have isolation rooms, and I know Mr. Dutton will talk about this a little bit later, but they would go to one of the isolation rooms that we are using, and then through that process, there would be some more, I don't want to say testing, but more screening things that would happen, where possibly the parent would have to come pick the student up. And, you know, there's been some questions. Every time a kid has a symptom, does the parent have to come pick it up? And the answer could be yes. Because we certainly are going to err on the side of safety for everybody, because that's what we need to do. And then after that, it becomes the piece of the testing, and then what do we do with that student that is, you know, we think has been exposed or not exposed, that's where the Department of Health really needs to be a partner with us, and that's what we've kind of been talking through. Because really the school can't notify you if a child in your student's classroom was exposed. That's not what the school is functioned to do. We can't do that because of FERPA and HIPAA laws. That's where the Department of Health will be stepping in to kind of take the next step of what that's going to look like.
So you'll contact the Department of Health, and then the Department of Health will contact, like, us to let us know if there was something or no.
They may or they may not. I think that's their discretion as well. If you get communication, it will come from the Department of Health, unless it's Mrs. Ozark calling you. It's not going to come from us. And I said in the last session, as an example, I've already indicated to teachers and, staff members. So if you see someone go home, and I may or may not know, I truly may not know what the reason is, that they've gone home. That's not my place to tell anyone. So the teacher may have a student leave school because after being at the nurse's office, we don't know if it's a loose tooth or something like that, but, people are going to want to know. So I caution, don't even ask me. I'm not going to, deliver that information. A communication would come from the Department of Health because it reported something to them. They have given us some guidance and we're following that guidance. Yes.
What about kids that are, like, I have kids that are constantly coughing because they have bad allergies, and no matter what medicine they get, they still have a cough.
Right, so we indicated we want parents to tell us those things, and Mrs. Ozog may already know because you're the 3-5 group, and she's working with their children, and I gave the example. In the last session, I have a family member who takes some high blood pressure medicine, and that gives a tickly cough for about 30 minutes after the person takes it. Now, the questionnaire says, do you have a cough? And so, we need to apply prudence. So when I had initial conversation about the thermometer gauge with Mrs. Ozog, we talked about if the student's symptom, the only symptom is one thing, whether it be a temperature or the cough, that we would try to do some more testing. If it's only temperature and nothing else, we would retake the temperature with the same machine to the best of our ability so that we have a consistent reading. If we see all our machines are very well calibrated, we probably wouldn't go to those lengths, but right now we don't know that. So we do want to apply, some good judgment here. So if you know things like that, you are not sure Mrs. Ozog knows, you may want to reach out to her and have the conversation. We certainly don't want to send a well child home because they do have other things. But if something does stand out, we also know that the child could have 2 conditions at once, and so we don't want to miss something. So if something seems different to you or to her, that may be very different. And so the open dialogue will be important.
Right, and some of those things are, one of the biggest indicators is the fever. If they have a fever, they're going to want you to call your primary care doctor, and they're going to ask you a series of questions of, was there exposure? Do you know anybody? And they say, even if you answer no to those, they may say that they want maybe get a test for your insurance, right? But like just for a cough or, those type of things, that's where they're going to ask and dig a little bit deeper and find out, is there other symptoms that are coinciding with that? And then they're going to make the recommendation. But again, that's going to be between the parent and the school nurse or the doctor, your primary care doctor. Because again, I think for the most part, they're going to err on the side of caution with everything with that. And we have to, there's, and again, the asymptomatic ones are the ones that we don't know about. And that's some of the other things that we kind of go through here as we go. So that is going to be the biggest thing, And again, I go back to the virtual learning piece and having that set up already. We're going to have it. We're going to have kids that are in and out because this family was maybe exposed, and they're going to say, the Department of Health, not us, but the Department of Health will recommend that they quarantine for 14 days. And we know that. And so part of what we have to do on our end is be able to be prepared for that. we're not gonna send 14 days worth of, unless we need to, unless they don't have technology, they can't do it. But we've got to be able to say, okay, kids at home, they're asymptomatic, they can still do learning, they're still gonna log in, they can still do that. We can still take attendance that way. It's just, that's what we have to do. Because we do anticipate it. I mean, and I've said this in the other group, and I'll say it, once school's open, we're open. It's not Poland's open, I mean, everything is connected. I live here, you live there, this person lives there, this person works there. And when school's open, everybody's at risk, so to speak, or you're gonna be exposed in some way or not. So we know there's gonna be the probability of that happening is probably gonna happen. But again, do what we can do here at school, as safe as we possibly can, keep the kids learning, keep them comfortable with learning, and keep going. I mean, that's really what we have to do. Can I go to the next slide?
Sure. So contact tracing, we're going to supply information as we're requested to the Department of Health to support appropriate contact tracing. Some of these schools in the region have had different circumstances, whether it be before the March closure or with employees over the summer. What I'm hearing is that they might ask for who were they in contact with, how long. If it's a student, they may ask for contact information. I don't see that happening in isolation, but we certainly also want to make sure that if the school is able to provide some additional details of, if the student goes to split family circumstances and there's a need to communicate to both those locations, and the Department of Health might not know that, but there's an implication for our families or community. We're going to want to talk to parents about the need to do that, even if there isn't an ongoing communication between households and things like that. To this end, the form that you filled out coming into the building is the same one that the teachers and all employees at Ms. and I are filling out when we come into work. And we've tweaked that a couple times. We borrowed from other agencies to see what they're saying is working, and we will continue to modify that. And that information is being collected daily. Some schools are using something like that for visitors. Right now, we're taking a very conservative approach to school visitors and allowing that. Clearly, we don't expect parents to be able to eat with students in elementary like we have in the past and things like that. We will designate some processes for how to have Mrs. Ozak meet a parent with a student who needs to be home, or an aide escort the student to a place where they're not entering offices and possibly exposing other individuals. If those circumstances need to be tweaked, then the only way we can do those things is to place the building on a medical hold while students exit part of the building. We're going to be concerned about privacy, but we certainly have not worked out all those details, but we'll provide the contact tracing as requested. And we're on the back end of School Tool working on developing some reports about cohorts of students that might be together, what students in 3, 4, 5, what rooms they've been in, things like that. So that could be easily done to expedite any kind of communication if there is a positive situation of COVID. So the summary of the steps, again, this is as recently developed as yesterday, would be students are screened with a temperature device before entering the building. If we have not gone down the path of before they get on the school bus, we're going to, rely on parents to also be our partner, that if the student gets on the school bus, at least when they left your custody, they were not experiencing symptoms. Symptoms could arise throughout the school day, so that you may not have known that, but student approaches or staff member fills out the screening form, and there's a possibility that they might be experiencing COVID symptoms. We are going to isolate the students by bringing them to an isolation room, is what they're calling it. That is supervised, and staff members will be asked not to report to work. Parents will be contacted of students, and we're going to encourage parents to consult with their pediatrician or go to the Department of Health for a diagnostic test, because either of those things might be able to give the parent a written assurance that the child does not have active COVID. And parents don't all have the ability to get to those places or make it happen as quickly as they sometimes want to. So in the event that those things can't happen for a variety of reasons, it might be a vehicle or transportation issue, they're new to the area, they don't have a pediatrician, then the school's response without those assurances is going to be, we're going to offer you remote learning for 14 days. We really have no ability to quarantine a child, but it's going to be like our local quarantine. You didn't provide some assurance to the school prior to the 14 days that the Department of Health says the child is symptom-free, then we're going to offer you 14 days of virtual learning, which is why Mr. Cuthbertson talked about we want students to get into the routine of having the Chromebooks, checking into classes, because that might happen while families waiting for testing, or they can't get to a medical provider before the 14 days.
The next, obviously, is the mask protocol. So the guidance that was delivered to the school district is to have social distancing in your classrooms, get 6 feet of separation, which we are able to do here. And it said that if you are able to do that, if instruction was going on, that you could have the students remove masks. But the other piece to that is districts could have the option of having students in masks. And again, I know that this is could be a political thing or whatever the case may be. But for us, the safest thing is for students to be in masks, at least to start, and to know that that is what we are going to do. It is science, it's proven that the masks do work. And again, with everything that we just talked about with, these symptoms and then having to get a test or not get a test, we know that if the students are in masks and when we're doing, our daily things, that is the safest thing, and that is what we are going to do. Mrs. Dutton will probably talk a little bit about certain things that may come up. For example, use the example of high school class or a class with only 2 people in the class with a full classroom. Could there be some things that we look at down the road? Yes, there is those things. But for us right now, the biggest thing is, again, safety. And there's a lot of unknowns. But what we do know is that the masks have proven to work, and that is what we are going to do. Obviously, we will provide mask breaks for students throughout the day. We're going to provide movement breaks for the students throughout the day. It is not going to be a typical, school day in some regards because of some of the things that, the restrictions that are given to us. But again, we feel that this is where we need to go for the safety of everybody in the building, and to make it work as best as we can, given those circumstances.
So even when the kids are sitting at their desk, they have to have them mask on.
To start, absolutely. We really feel like we're not going to change that without communicating to parents. It won't be a day's notice. You need some time to, decide if that's, something that you're comfortable with, or ask us questions. So what we talked about was, we might have some high school electives where they're in a full-size classroom, 1 teacher, 3 students. We could consider perhaps some scenarios, but first off, we would want an understanding of why we are doing them among the student body, because what we also don't want is, when I go to Mrs. Dutton's classroom, I don't have to wear a mask. That's what it'll look like to students instead of there's 3 students there. So we're all going to start out with masks. If we say I mean, we know, you know, they're uncomfortable. We certainly don't enjoy wearing them, and we're trying to be thoughtful about how long we ask students to wear them. But if we say, this is a unique situation, we can allow some more flexibility, we will communicate that with parents. But if the situation is, I guess, extremely unique, we also want to be aware of that.
And again, we know, you know, that it's not comfortable, it's not ideal. And we understand that there's gonna be some kids that for sensory issues maybe struggle with that. We need to know those things. You know, the difference is, and again, I guess I'll just propose the question, what happens if the kid doesn't wear the mask? You know, for us, that's the question, right? And we've even asked that question all the way to the commissioner, and the commissioner has not given us an answer on what that is. Is it a code of conduct thing? Is it an executive order thing? But it is kind of falls in line with just like our dress code. You know, that's the way I'm looking at it. If this is what we're saying we're doing and you're not doing it because you just are choosing not to do it, that's just being insubordinate, and that's what it is. If it's another issue, whether it's a sensory issue or there's something going on that we don't know, yeah, eyeglasses fogging up, you know, those are, you know, we know this is going to be some of the things that we have to work through, all of us, you know, but it's certainly not, I don't want this to turn into a punitive thing, a kid's not wearing a mask, but we're going to punish the kid. That's not what this is about. You know, we understand that they're going to need breaks, but there's a difference between that and there's a difference between I'm not going to wear it because you're telling me that I'm wearing it, you know. So that's where we are standing with the mask protocol right now.
How often do the mandatory mask breaks occur? Is it like once an hour or?
We're going to develop some strategies with the grade level teams that make, you know, that draw in the age of the learner and when there might be natural breaks, like an opportunity to go outside, some things like that, but.
And I've encouraged staff to do that. I've encouraged, you know, if it's nice outside, let's get outside. We can get separated and socially distanced, and you could have your mask break out there, which is recommended. We want to encourage those things. You know, and again, kids are resilient, you know, and I think the teachers, you know, they are going to do some things with the kids to try to get them to understand why we're doing this. And I mean, we've all probably had those, I'm hoping, some of those conversations with our kids ourselves. I know I have. You know, I have one that is adamant every time we go out, she puts the mask on and she's, you know, or I have another one who would go lick the door handle if he could. But, you know, it's just, that's what they are, you know, but I think at the end of the day, if we say, you know, and this is why we have to say to the kids, this is why we're doing it, it's for safety, it's not comfortable. But, you know, we're gonna provide those breaks for those kids because we know that it is gonna be a challenge for them. So.
And it may not be as much with the 3-5 parents, but we also said in the last group, if you know your child has some intolerance issues with wearing them, and as teacher assignments come out, we want you to have those conversations with your child's classroom teacher, and if you can't reach them with Mr. Cuthbertson, because if it was as simple as there's a situation where a child needs a little bit more frequent mask breaks, and we're building up some adaptions to wearing it throughout the day, we certainly want to know those things and work with families to make those things happen.
So there's a couple of questions here on the screen. One is the school providing the mask? So yes, that was clear in the guidance that the school needs to provide masks for those students that need them. Whether they don't have one or if something happens to their mask, we do have a supply of masks for those students. Same thing on the bus. The student is trying to get on, you know, the bus and they don't have a mask, the bus drivers will have a mask for those students. Obviously, we want the students to be comfortable, so if you have masks that are going to make them comfortable, we would encourage that. But there will be masks here for students if they need one. The other question was in regards to masks, how would you expect gym classes to be? So again, gym class is very different. It's going to be very different for your students. You know, and basically what they're telling us is anything that involves heavy breathing, there's got to be a minimum of 12 feet when that happens, which we can do in our new gym or whether it be outside. You know, and again, this is gonna be real, specific to the activity that the kids are doing. You know, I would expect that we're gonna start off, and I've had conversations with the P staff, you're gonna be looking at more anaerobic type things, stretching, flexibility type things, more knowledge-based things. And then there's gonna probably be those opportunities to have those aerobic activities, but they would wear them as much as we can, and when we are exercising outside and we can get that separation, obviously, we would want to be able to do that for the kids. And again, that's, you know, kind of why the gyms aren't open in New York State. They can't think how that's gonna work properly, right? But if it's outside, we can do some different things. So yes, those things will be happening.
Can they wear the gaiters also or no?
I think the regulation says cloth mask.
So if they're the cloth gaiters that just can come off and go around.
I believe that's okay. I haven't heard otherwise. I mean, I saw an article, I think, you know, I saw an article, you know, that said, as long as it's cloth, it's, you know, everything is different. We can ask that question, but I don't see that as a barrier, because I know some of the masks that we all have are just, that material is just in the shape of a mask.
I'll let you know when I know.
So I do, you know, just the day in general, because I do think that's the most important thing, is what's the day gonna look like for the kids? That's kind of what we wanna know. So the first is how we get them into school, and then the dismissal. That's a big piece, because those things are gonna be different. You know, coming into school, it can't just be the normal, here comes the bus, and all the kids come through these doors, and then we go to our classes. So we know that. Obviously, we have some different spaces now with the new addition over here, but we are going to try to, and we will communicate this when we finalize our plan of where kids should enter by grade level. Because again, we're trying to negate as much as we can the bottlenecking of students in a particular area, and be able to separate our cohorts as best we can. And that's kind of really what we're looking at, is our elementary is kind of in the elementary wing, they'll kind of be there. You know, our middle school is going to be in the middle school, and our high school is going to be in the high school. We're trying not to have it overlap, even though it's hard in a building that's shared, but we're going to try to do that as best we can. And the same thing applies when the arrival happens. We want to be able to put people in different positions so that there's not that bottleneck and that congestion where there's congregation of people.
We also are able to do this, and it's not on a future slide, so I want to make sure I point it out, because we're not going to be offering breakfast as it has been. There's not a way for us to do that with safety and still use the cafeteria and other places. Like, we set this up as a cafeteria, then it can't be used as a PE or break station. So we can't transition rooms quickly enough and still have breakfast as we always have. We will provide it by sending it home with students that night on the bus or to eat the next morning. So those things may shift our arrival time for buses, because we won't have to build in eating time in the morning, and we'll also be impacting the arrival time to school. We aren't going to cluster students together in a gymnasium and supervise them. We really want students to arrive more closely to the start of our school day, but with enough time that we can stagger the arrival. And the data that we get on our forms will help us plan that even more. If you have been using the dismissal area for parent transportation at the elementary wing, you would know at the end of the school day, all our students is passed and dismissed. They all stand side by side in the foyer, and stand with Ms. Irwin, and they wait and watch for the parent. That also won't be able to happen for us, because we won't be able to have students so close. So we have thought about using the elementary gym, or we're calling it our multi-purpose room, to space students out that are waiting for parent pickup in that location. Use our radio communication to say, Ms. Irwin, Mrs. Dutton's here to pick up her daughter. We've sent her to exit. If we can have students outside, safely controlled, and out in the fresh air, because there'll be more contained during the school day, we'd be happy to do that too, but that may be weather permitting. So these are some of the areas that, when we look at dismissal plans and things like that, we'll be able to make some more determinations about, give you more exact times. But we wanted you to be aware that these things were changing at both ends of the day.
So my kids come to school, there's 3, elementary, middle, and high school. There's Molly has to come here, Grady has to come to one door, right, come, what, like, how is that gonna work? And same thing for when they dismiss, like, they're not gonna be able to walk together, or?
So the exceptions may be in your circumstance, so this is maybe only in your situation because I know it. So Molly may have to enter the elementary. And because we also know that we're trying to isolate the high school on the second floor and the middle school on the main floor, they're gonna have to use, pass each other at some point in the day. So would it be okay for Grady and Brett to enter by the tornado? That may work for you and work for us as well. And so we may have to look at specific situations for our walkers like that. But in general, if a student didn't have those other siblings or they were arriving by bus, we're trying to determine if the best place, for example, 9 through 12, is at our big lobby, because for 9 through 12, one of their first classes every other day is PE. So they're already going to be down here, limit their movement, they're not going to use lockers. So we don't want to make unnecessarily, if it doesn't make good sense for a student to walk all the way around the building. If he wants to do that, because that's where if other peers are entering, that's fine. But if there are things like that, as we implement a plan that don't make sense to you as a parent, it might be because I don't know your specific details. I know yours, but I don't know everyone. And so if something makes good sense, we certainly don't want to overlook it.
So therefore Molly would walk herself down to elementary, or?
Well, there'd be-
Obviously, I enter the school, I just need to know.
Sure.
When I leave for work, I know that they're all going to school.
Right.
all one o'clock.
Right.
So she would probably just come in the elementary and go right to her classroom. Like,
Yeah.
Not gonna be,
Yeah.
we're trying to limit that of where they go.
Well, because normally they would all walk to
Yes.
the front door.
Yes.
And she would go down and then they would
Right.
all go there.
Right. So I would, if she, and she's older, so it might be different too if she was, okay, they want to do it. But if she could depart ways with them at the tornado, well, somebody, watched her walk to the elementary entrance and she went in that way, that'd be ideal. If that doesn't work, we want you to reach out to us, though, because everybody's
Well, you're still gonna have a guard right there, right?
maybe not in all the locations in the same way, because we also are going to monitor the,
There'll be somebody there, but it's,
but the,
I'm just saying right there on the, where the tornado is there gonna be a person just,
probably on the stoop.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
that's for the screen.
okay.
So this next, well, hold on, there's one question here. Is there going to be a dress code for the mask? Do they have to be plain or can they wear a SpongeBob cartoon one? So, yes, obviously school appropriate. It can't, it's going to be, with the dress code. I obviously don't want inappropriate mask. And again, if you look at the dress code, it can't disrupt learning. Obviously, we know the kids are going to be creative and that's fine, but as long as it's not going to create a distraction for their classmates or the teacher or everybody, it's going to follow the dress code. That's basically what it's going to. Okay. So I just wanted to kind of show you, I just to talk about their day, and I will kind of, if I can get this mouse to work, and it's not working. I changed it. So I just kind of put in here, just as an example of what the day is going to look like for, I know it's hard to see, but this is kind of what their day is going to look like. And again, you can see that where, my mouse isn't really working too good here, but let's use the last one as a 5th grade as an example. They're going to have an academic block in the morning. And I guess that's where I want to be specific with 5th grade, because they are a little bit different than what 3rd and 4th are going to be doing. You're going to have your 3 teachers, and right now the way that it's planned out, Mr. Manley will be doing the math for all of 5th grade. Mr. Allen will be doing all of the ELA for 5th grade, and Mrs. Lepper will be doing the science and social studies for 5th grade. They're going to stay in their homeroom. So if you think of it like fifth grade is gonna have an orange, a blue, and a white team, and they're all in their rooms, those teachers will rotate between those rooms to do their lessons.
We physically relocated Mrs.
Right.
Lecker's room, and we've done this all summer, so that, and appreciate all the time and energy the teachers have given us to do this, so that they are as close as they can be, if not next to each other, so they're walking across the hallway. They're not going around the corner. We are not intending to leave students unsupervised. It's one hall or one door to the next. And that's some of also why you're not seeing a lot of photographs of the elementary room, because we're moving teachers still at this time and getting furniture out of the room. So,
Well, if I could scroll down, which I can't, but you would notice, I do think we need to talk about the day itself. You know, as we are planning through this, currently the plan. There you go. So, currently the plan that we have proposed right now is that we will end the students' day earlier than normal. And again, there's a couple reasons for that. One is if, you know, the math situation and it's going to be a different type of day. The thought was if we can end the kids' day, we can still get our core instruction done, do what we need to do during the day, get the kids, you know, day done in an earlier time, which would be around that 2:15 time, 2:10, 2:15, 2:25 time, as we dismiss the whole district. The other thought behind that is I think we needed time to have some professional development with our teachers. So that leaves us at the end of the day, the teacher's day still continues after the kids leave. It allows us to have those discussions with curriculum, to look at our online resources and assessments if we need to have them, to be able to have those discussions about what we can do to make the virtual learning piece happen if it needs to happen, if we do go remote. And so there's a lot that we can do with that. It's very hard to do that in a K-12 building unless you have that type of schedule. And the other piece to this is, you know, we have to use our people internally to do those things. Because I feel we have some quality people that are very adequate and, you know, very skilled at some of these online things that we are, you know, using on a daily basis, Google Classroom, the Google Meets, other apps that we use. And we want to be able to have our teachers provide some of that professional development for our other teachers. And this allows us to do that. And we do understand that is a little bit of a change, but part of what we've asked you tonight with the transportation and the virtual learning piece is if that's going to work for us. So that's currently what we are planning for. But again, based on some of the information that we are getting from these meetings and from what you provide to us, that could change. But again, I do feel like it's important to do that at this point for various reasons. One is for the sanity of the kids and those things. But the other thing is because I do think we can use that opportunity for our teachers to really work together and give ourselves the necessary tools to make sure that we're providing the best instruction that we can for your kids.
The BOCES kids, are they gonna be out the same time, so transportation will be an issue?
That's part of why we not communicated that this is final. So what we're doing right now is we're collecting dismissal times from different sites of where our students are attending, because either we need to set up a different kind of transportation plan or make sure those transportation routes feed into our main route. And just like we are considering shortening the school day, there are some schools that have talked about shortening their day as early as 1:30. If we have a student attending that program, we either need to develop a plan for direct transportation home rather than hold them in our building waiting, or we need to figure out how those transportation routes work.
I know you guys don't want to send 2 buses to my house.
If we didn't have to, probably we wouldn't want to. But those are honestly some of the things, you know, I know there was some concern, and I appreciate, you know, the different feedback that people have been asking questions and things about. I'm hearing there might be an earlier dismissal. That is true. We're talking about it a lot in the building because we're trying to figure out, does it work? Are all these things going to come together? And the transportation is a big piece. And so just like we're talking about our day, somebody else might have a whole different circumstance. So we are gathering all that information about those locations. So again, if there's something we touch on tonight that you still say, oh, I think I better ask a question about my own circumstance, call us, email us.
Will somebody, will the teachers or somebody be sanitizing the desks in the rooms every night or no?
Someone will be doing that.
Walking down the floor out like or something? Okay.
Yeah, you know,
It's different by grade level, things like that, to be honest, to be honest.
so that's, you know, going through this, you learn a lot about what cleaning is, what disinfecting is, and what sanitizing is. You know, obviously, we have to have a routine cleaning plan throughout the day, because that's what you have to do. The disinfecting happens when the kids aren't here, when they can go in and really use the chemical type stuff and really disinfect those things. Yes, you know, one of the questions that was maybe you have, I'll try to answer, like the bathroom as an example. You know, the bathrooms, if you haven't been to our elementary rooms, there's usually designated one boy, one girl. That's the classroom, and you share that. You know, the thought is right now is that we will designate one bathroom for the classroom. So for example, Mr. Manley will have this bathroom. That's going to be his. And part of that is you working with Mr. Hess in the custodial staff. You know, 5th grade has this, you know, prep or this special at this time. You need to go down there and do a cleaning in that bathroom just to have a cleaning schedule. It's not going to be a total disinfectant, you know, type of thing, but it will be cleaned as best we can during those times.
What at the end of the school day, can you use 4 hours or no?
Well, we,
Yes.
I'm not,
Yeah.
Well, I know now, but
Yeah.
like, at the end of the school day, when the kids leave,
Yeah.
someone 4 hours,
Oh, yeah.
to make sure
Yeah.
everything's filled and.
yeah.
And we're going to try to build some of those things
Yeah.
in during the school day based on some of the, you know, patterns that we see. And we're also aware that there are some classroom teachers who do a lot of that anyway. Some are more comfortable doing that, some are not. So there's variables too that, you know, we may take into consideration as we meet with different grade level teams about what might be needed for their circumstances.
I just, you know, just talking about the specials, because it was brought up, I brought it up, you know, right now, PE, we do plan on having it in the big gym because we can separate and we can do some things in there or outside. We are going to start with our other specials in the classroom. You know, so art, music, and library or digital citizenship, as we call it, is going to start in the classroom. You know, and again, as a parent, I have a hard time with this because I'm trying to envision my kids sitting in the classroom all day long. And I want them to be able to move, but at the same time, we have to build capacity with our staff and our students about procedures and protocols of what this is going to look like. And to just say that we're going to do it from day one is not the right thing. So we want to be able to have some time at the beginning to say we're going to have these specials in the room. And as we get going through this and the kids start to learn how this is going to be, because it is going to be a learning experience for them, you know, then we will say, okay, maybe we can start bringing the kids to the art room or, you know, different specials. But we will start in the classroom with those, and then we will hopefully, you know, expand those out to those rooms, which is, again, another challenge in itself. So, but we feel that is the safest thing to do still. The next thing is lunch. So again, same thing. Right now, the plan is that lunches will be delivered to the rooms. Kids obviously will be 6 feet apart, you know, and they're going to be eating in the rooms. But again, if we feel like this is something that maybe for our older students, our 4th and 5th graders, we can provide that space where they can go. We want to be able to do that because we do want them to have some of those movement breaks, but also it's not fun to eat in the classroom all the time either. So, you know, again, this is, you know, everybody uses flexibility fluid. I mean, this is a living thing. It's going to be living all year long. It's going to be changing. And we've got to be able to adapt, but we feel like to start, this is the best way to do this. And as we get going and see how things shake out, then we can make adjustments as we go. So, and then these are just some pictures. I just tried to show you an example of what some of the rooms will look like. You know, this is a kindergarten room as an example. Again, the chairs aren't in there, but that's kind of what the desk would look like, 6 feet apart.
No classroom rug and things like that, but, you know, typically there'd be a lot more materials in the kindergarten classroom, taking those things out to do the appropriate social distancing and limiting touching of items and things.
Here's a first grade room, and obviously these are, you know, the teachers are still going through some of these. But you can see there's still some things, even in this picture here, where there's some things on the wall or the heater side. You know, those are extra chairs that we don't need in those rooms, that we'll have to be moving to another classroom. But that is kind of what it would look like. And then here's an example of a third grade room. And I think this one is set up for 12. And obviously our third grade classes aren't going to be that big. In the rooms that do have the bigger numbers are bigger rooms, to be honest with you, because we wanted to make sure that they had those space.
That's what the tab currently looks like on the website. It was changed. We may tweak it again because I think it's hard to see the contrast there, but it's on the left sidebar under the quick link. There's also a COVID section. They both link to each other. It's just trying to give an opportunity of finding the information to places. And we will regularly update that. And, you know, we're moving to a new platform from School Messenger to something called Parent Square. So we are, that platform allows teachers more communication with families. We asked for some additional phone numbers from families in the spring, and we'll be implementing that when school opens, we believe. Those changes, we believe, will allow for more frequent communication and without some of the barriers that our current system has, which is why we're making the adjustment. So right now, we're using those systems, but we are migrating to something else that I think you'll find more user-friendly.
There is just one more question here. It says, what if a walker is waiting for a sibling that is in 7th or 8th grade? Will they be allowed to meet with a child in the elementary?
Yeah, but we would want to work out the timing of that and those things. And if it became more helpful to have someone walk the 2nd grader up toward the 7th grader or something like that, we would want to work on those things. So those are the circumstances that if we start to send home information about times and drop-off areas, we would want you to contact us so we can look at individual circumstances. And we're fortunate to be able to do that because of, certainly how small we are and we, have a familiarity with our family.
So at this time, do you guys, is there any questions? Yes?
So when would parents and families have to notify the school of what option they're choosing, either virtual or?
Sooner than later.
This is not, I think, used Thursday of next week, but I mean, sooner than that would be helpful for us, honestly.
But we also know people might want to digest this information, and there's 2 more meetings tomorrow night, and it might be a family decision or a different decision for a different grade level, so we don't want to rush it either.
You know, and let me just speak to that because this is mostly, I know that some of you maybe are questioning what classroom teacher I'm gonna have. I know I've been getting teachers asking me that constantly. And it's not that I don't want to give that information, but we need this information to know because again, if 30% of our 5th grade students are gonna say they need virtual learning, that changes the game for us a little bit. You know, instead of maybe having 3 teachers do that, I would maybe have 2 teachers and then I would make one of them the virtual teacher for those kids. So this is why, we need to have that information. I certainly have class lists ready to go as is, but it could change the game in the sense that if we have, a large number of families that say they want to do virtual learning, it certainly changes how those class lists will be. And I certainly don't want to do that twice. It's only going to create frustration for you and for the teachers. So I'd rather have the accurate number. And honestly, it's not the best, but I'd rather make sure that it's done right the first time than have to do it 3 times.
and, you know, I'll just piggyback on that. We were trying to make sure in our time of sharing information that what we communicated to parents was enough information that you could make a healthy decision for your own circumstances and family at a pace where we felt like we had analyzed our opening plan and the information, where you had elements or enough of a structure where you could make a decision that was specific to your circumstances. So we did not send a survey early on saying, would you like virtual learning, when you didn't know what the 9 parameters are on the commitment form we're sending to you, or you didn't know we keep splitting class sizes all summer when we had new registrants. So, you know, that's meant teachers are moving around and things like that, but you might have expected your child was going to learn in a classroom of 18 or 20, not knowing we might be considering these things, and was it feasible, and how does the room locations play into this? And so, while we could have collected that information sooner, we feel like you have more information to make the best decision at this point in time. We don't want that decision to be rushed. If you need more information from us, if you want to see how close the classrooms are to each other, if you need more specific information about the arrival or dismissal plan, about lunch in the classroom, we want you to contact us, because, you know, we will allow some flexibility. In the earlier session, they said, what if I start my child and I say, you know, they have too much anxiety, I have too much anxiety. We want to work with parents through that process. We want to maybe see if we can eliminate the anxiety, but we also want this to be a great year and work with you on that process. So we don't want students in and out any more than they have to be, but we certainly want this to work for all parties.
About the IEP, Ms. Raphael and Mr. Waters are not going to be involved in kids anymore, or they will be?
They will be. There are two teachers that didn't.
And they're gonna come in and help too? I mean, I'm just.
There are some circumstances where we have said, because of the size of the classroom, if more students become virtual, that we will be very likely reaching out to parents and saying, we wrote a learning plan thinking your child was going to learn in a classroom of 18. Now they're learning in a classroom of 8. Let's see if something needs to shift, but they are still in those roles. And we realize those are individual conversations once we have a little bit more of the data. We aren't talking about taking away all supports, but there might be some that can be changed.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would not do those kinds of things without also having a conversation with the parents about.
Yeah, I think you'd be okay with the smaller class sizes, that, you know, Mr. Waters would be so necessary, but we'll see.
Yep.
But like I said, you know, if there's a service on the IEP, we will honor the IEP, we will honor what's on as part of the intervention of the service. But, you know, if there's some of those things that come up and it's, like Mrs. Dunn alluded to, I think those are individual conversations.
That's also why we buffered the numbers in the room, because we might have an adult who has to come in.
Right.
She was up and like, sorry, Mr.
Will it happen, or is it gonna be an issue if like you decide to try your kids in school and then you realize that it's not working for them, you have to switch to virtual, because the mask thing is like a major concern.
So honestly, a couple of points. One is, we truly believe it's possible that we could, as a state or region, have to shut down very quickly, but we, and, you know, even Mr. Batson has, you know, said he thinks this, and our teachers have said this, or we've heard conversations about this, but we'd rather, if we could have 10 days with students and develop a quick relationship with a new teacher, distribute materials, talk about protocols, and if everything else has to change after that, it's for us as educators and trying to have interactions with students, that's even better than never coming in the door at all. We know that kids will not tolerate all these circumstances, and so we certainly don't want to make the year miserable for an elementary student and then have that attitude about education possibly creep into other grade levels. But if it's something we have the ability to adjust, we want to have a discussion with parents. Is it a mask? Is it the movement breaks? Does the child need to, have a certain different routine? If parents are willing to have those conversations, we would prefer, because there might be another student who's not showing the same symptoms, but would also benefit from a change that we apply. So if parents are willing to provide us with information about the why, we would welcome that, but if we're not requiring that, so yes.
Okay, so virtual learning is just for 10 weeks.
That's what we're committing to. we
Okay,
hope.
so if say, my son's in fourth grade, small class size. If 70% of them say they're gonna do virtual learning, and that's how you're facing these classes. So after the 10 weeks, what are you gonna do with the kids that are coming back?
That's why we want to be able to evaluate that, and see how things work. I'm actually more worried that in 10 weeks, we're gonna be entering cold and flu season, and it's going to go the other way, to be honest about it. But that's why, if somebody's thinking, this is not working for me, and I'm at the virtual, like, before the 10 weeks is up, we're gonna start making some inquiries of those families to say, okay, how do I make some adjustments and things like that, so.
So like, say you don't get shut down if we were COVID, those kids that are doing virtual can stay out, or you bring them all?
No, you could extend that. We were just reluctant to ask parents to commit until February 1. On the flip side of that, if you look at the form, as you read it, you will see we've left the opportunity for us to say, if a student's parent picks virtual, and then the student is not in attendance at the times we have classes, or the student is not turning in work, or the student isn't able to get online, that we may be talking to you about how do we get the child into school in a safe way, because virtual, we don't want a student not learning because of a virtual environment either. So we reserve that right to say we may be contacting you as well to say, how can we work through this? But you could re-up that. In fact, if you knew you were you're committed to virtual, it's just your circumstance, you're willing to commit to that longer, that could only help us, but we didn't feel comfortable asking parents to commit to that long without at least seeing how, things went after 10 weeks.
And we just don't know what's gonna happen. Everybody says after the election, what's gonna happen, or in January, we don't know, so
Thank you.
we don't
very
wanna
much.
be able to, we wanna be able to be, again, it's living, and it's gonna continue to live. So,
And that's a new one for us. That hasn't come up yet, so that was a good question. Thank you. Yes.
Most of my questions were answered, but if they do learn from home, will they at any point be able to meet their teachers in person? Are you doing that if there's a lot of kids at home learning?
Well,
Come in like for the beginning of the year or something?
we hadn't thought of that, to be
Yeah.
honest about it, so I don't know. It certainly, if we start with the 2:20 dismissal, there might be some individual appointments that could happen during those times.
Yep.
I would expect our elementary teachers, if that was more the case of a large group, might be asking Mr. Cuthbertson for that, because I know that's what happened in the spring, is they were asking about how could they say goodbye to students and things like that. So thank you, that's a good idea as well. So we can, start thinking about that.
Because that is gonna be hard,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning when you're you don't know who the teacher is, how you're expected to do this virtually, that is gonna be a little bit of a challenge. The other thing I would just say for the 5th grade parents, on top of all this, we have some other things going on with technology. And one of them is we did a migration with our technology, and really 5th grade, this really applies for 5th grade because K through 4, we do this for them. But passwords for Chromebooks to get into their Google accounts have to be reset when the kids come in. But as we were saying, if we can get them in the door and, get that type of stuff done, and then, if something does happen, at least we're ready for that. So like, those are some of the other things that we've got to try to deal with. So basically what that means is students 5 through 12 have to basically come into the, you know, it doesn't have to be the building, but it has to be on a network computer. It can't be like a Chromebook, it can't be a laptop, it's got to be a hardware computer. And they actually have to type in their new password for Google. So like, if they had a Google account last year, which most of them did, they have to do a new one and type it in. So, you know, we're working on a plan for our middle school, high school to have that done as we get schedules out and things like that. But for 5th grade, we're just going to have them do it when they came in. So if you're thinking virtual, we've got to come up with a plan for those virtual people that you're still going to have to do that, where they would come down, we have to get them, you know, to a network computer and they have to log in. So I just want to put that out
Not
there.
impossible, but.
Not impossible, but it's just another,
Yeah.
it's another obstacle that we're dealing with, just because of the migration that we've had with our technology.
If school gets shut down, do we go back to Google Classroom like it was in the spring, or?
Well, so it's not even going to be an option for teachers. Part of the discussion is that we've been having, in every class is going to have a Google Classroom set up at the beginning. You know, and again, part of what I've been talking with teachers is you have to start preparing your students and your families for that possibility. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know, they're going to go home and that's what it is, but you have to have assignments, assessments done through Google Classroom so that students are comfortable with that. Because honestly, some of the feedback that we got, especially from our elementary, you know, students and families, was they weren't too comfortable with Google Classroom. They didn't know how to even submit assignments correctly. So part of the orientation, like I was talking about, is those first couple of weeks of school for our teachers and our students is going to be a lot of that stuff. It's our procedures and protocols for hand washing and how to wear the mask properly, you know, getting comfortable with Google Classroom, getting your logins, knowing what those are, you know, so teachers can work with those students when they're physically in the building to kind of get them comfortable with that. So if it does turn into a remote situation, it should be somewhat seamless. You know, we've actually talked about providing parents some, you know, professional development in some regards. I mean, we put out the video, which is helpful, but it's not the same. You know, so like part of the thing that I'm, you know, discussing and thinking about is with open house, for example. Like, we're not going to be able to have a traditional open house. It's probably going to be more of a virtual open house. And part of that virtual open house, maybe the teachers are going to have a little session for our parents about this is Google Classroom, this is how we, you know, those type of things, because I do think we have to be prepared for that. You know, if we don't use it, we don't use it, but at least we know if it happens, we're prepared for it.
One other question. What help will the nurse have, because one person will get overwhelmed?
Yep, so we have two things happening. One is ability to hire outright personnel, and the other is a BOCES itinerant. So there are schools that are interested in adding employees to the health department team. Poland is one of them. We are one of the few schools, and this came up very early in the summer. In our conversations, we are one of the few schools that has only one nurse. And so certainly in discussions with Mrs. Ozag, it is that even if she has symptoms and we don't have a school nurse or a sub that can come in because we're all competing for the same sub, we will likely have to be close to that day and go to a virtual model. So we are working with sharing with the region. In the meetings that I've had, I have actually requested a share of an LPN and an RN so that at any time I might have that combination, whether it's Mrs. Ozag and an LPN, BOCES RN and an LPN, and then also reaching out to retirees in the medical field or the nursing field that may want to come in with some predictability that currently sub in the region of all those schools. The plan doesn't really necessarily require, or the submission of the plan did not require to staff the isolation rooms in that way. And some schools are not. If we can, that is our goal. We really understand that the dynamics of all this and the number of isolation rooms we need throughout the year may change. And truly, any of these positions could only help ease some of the concerns, so those things are happening, but I don't have the name and the number at this time to share. So those things are all agree, this, at this time.
So you expect to have two.
That's my hope. If not, another model would be Mrs. Ozog, an LPN, and a trained aide who had to be trained in some of the COVID symptoms, and maybe was just supervising students within the isolation room while Mrs. Ozog made calls and things like that. And right now, we identified some areas near exits and things like that for isolation rooms, so we're not having students travel all through the school. But those things may change depending on what population show vulnerability, the numbers, at different times of year, so that will be fluid. I said to the earlier group, we exhausted most of our classrooms by spreading out our class sections, but we do have small, not small, I guess, like.
Not a classroom.
Right, 3 or 4 people could be socially distant, but it wouldn't hold a full class, so we could have isolation rooms 5K2 or 3-5 or some things like that. If we said we've got too much volume or we've got too much intermixing of students, so we don't have all those details, but it could be an aid. It was intentionally vague in our plan because I knew that I was hoping for some of those details on the back end, so I indicated it would be a trained person, but our hope was that it's going to be somebody from the medical field and on the end working with Mrs. Ozog.
With everything that needs to be done, do you think we will be starting on time?
Well, we really need to be honest about it, unless something delays from the governor. So I know one of the questions I got over the weekend was, could there be a staggered start? Could one grade level come half the class and then the next half the class come the next day? That can't work and allow us to meet our attendance requirement. We could have half the class in school and half the class virtually with the parent at home and meet our attendance requirement, but I don't think that did sound like the question that Karen I talked to was asking, really hoping like a phase can start just like we did when businesses and things reopened. And more than what we heard through the announcement that was made from the governor, I actually expected them. My brother and his family live in Vermont, and they have had all summer long much fewer cases than we have had, and their school, the start for the whole state was delayed. So I was expecting something more along those lines than what we heard. But, we could do a model like that if students were attending from home, but I'm not sure that is exactly going to be the perfect model either if students don't know how to use the technology and don't have devices and things like that. So we're hopeful, but we also recognize we could be having all these meetings and planning for all these things, and the numbers increase. I was told that the numbers in Oneida County went up after the last couple of days. I didn't hear that information directly, but those things could happen and we don't open, and then it's a virtual delay before we can come in person, but if the numbers decrease, then we can come in person again, hopefully.
Just add, scheduling for the most part, based on what we currently plan is done.
Yeah.
I mean, it is,
That's
we've
not
done
hard.
most of that work, it's there. The big push is the classroom moves and getting teachers in there and getting them comfortable and, honestly, getting them the class list and, that's, I know that they're anxious for those, but at the same time, like, getting them in the rooms, going, at least the numbers that they're dealing with, and then, we want to be able to do that as soon as we can. I think in my letter I put out there that we, at least by the 24th of August, we would have, hopefully all that information out to, students and families and teachers. Obviously sooner we can do that, the better, we will do that. But, again, I want to make sure we have all the accurate information, so we do it once and people know exactly what's going on, and then we go from there. Is there any other questions that we can answer? And, you know, you may have some as we go through this, and honestly, if you email, call the school, you know, we'll do our best to answer those questions for you. And like I said at the beginning, I know there's a lot of anxiety either way. And, you know, but again, you know, we feel like this is what we can do as safe as we can and as best as we can. And, you know, we're going to do the best that we can to keep the kids safe and keep them learning. I mean, that's really what we're here to do, so.
We're in a crunch time, we recognize that, and we know you want to make decisions, so I'm gonna throw this out. For me, it's not for everyone, but for me, if you do have questions, please do not hesitate to email me over the weekend. That's actually helpful because it paces out the questions throughout the week instead of all on Monday or whatnot, and I can see what concerns people have, so please, if that's helpful to you and things come up.
Same for me.
Get you a quick response. I think he's being very kind because he has a different family circumstance than I do, but please, I offer that to you.
If one decides, I don't know if you would know this, but if he decides, like certain, will he decide certain counties to keep the school open and some will virtual, or?
My understanding is it's based on the metric of infection rates and all that stuff. And again, right now,
As a region, though,
as a
not
region,
by
yeah,
county.
as a region. It's not particularly by county, so, you know, things would have to go sour, you know, in a hurry. But that's, again, nobody knows. And like I said at the beginning, like, when school's open, we're all open, you know, and we just hope that people, you know, continue to do what they've been doing, as best as they can. And, hopefully that those numbers don't spike. I mean, you know, just don't know. Anything else? Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. And if you have any other questions, like we said, just let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you have any forms, because you made a commitment, I'll take those too.
So, we do have a question. So there is a question about a student home with a slight hole joint virtual check. That is an option. So the person that asked that question, that is an option.
Right.
So I can recycle it, or you can store it on for like, I don't know.
So I got a question.